Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Shortly after Chen Ming left the galaxy, in a space some distance from the space station, a spaceship that had been parked here and turned off for a long time finally started its engine. In the captain's room of this spaceship, the captain and a man dressed in ordinary clothes were staring at the direction where Chen Ming's spaceship left the galaxy with lingering fear. His hands were still shaking slightly until now, and even the black mist beads in his hands could not make him feel at ease. He was another psychic arranged by the Zwujing High Level to handle the finishing work of the space station and the underground laboratory. It was just that his teammate was one step faster than him, crushed the black mist glass beads first, and entered the space station. Then he saw the scene of his teammate being squeezed unconscious by Chen Ming like a chicken on the spaceship, as well as a brief epitome of most of the subsequent events on the space station. From Chen Ming's performance of instantly killing his teammates, the Zwujing psychic could see that he was definitely not the opponent of this 3-meter-tall black creature. So he did not go to support his teammates, nor did he do anything to expose himself. He even immediately asked the captain to shut down the spacecraft engine and most of the equipment that might expose the spacecraft's position. This allowed him on the spacecraft to only see part of what Chen Ming did on the space station. But from the chaos that lasted for nearly an hour on the space station behind, and the visible signs of horror that broke out on the surface of the planet, he no longer dared to think about what happened. He just squatted here, waiting quietly, praying that Chen Ming did not find him. Chen Ming did not find it. After all, he did not have the highest point detection equipment now. And the equipment on the space station was indeed not easy to detect the completely shut down leftway spacecraft. Therefore, there was only one fish that slipped through the net in this galaxy. However, even if the leftway psychic was sure that Chen Ming really went to the edge of the galaxy and did not find him, he was still panicked. He did not dare to confirm whether there were any living people. He could only wait. When Chen Ming finally entered the hyperspace station and left, he finally had the courage to let the captain drive the ship and quickly asked the captain to prepare to leave. He was a psychic after all. Even if he did nothing and watched his teammates being caught, he would not be directly regarded as a pawn by the top leaders. As long as he reported the matter truthfully, he would be fine. Hurry up and leave. The left path psychic urged the captain again. His heartbeat was still so fast that he could not stop. A scene that happened a few days ago suddenly flashed through his mind. In fact, they did come here to deal with the problem of dimensional infection, but the original name was to come to verify the experimental results on the space station. Before they arrived at the space station and really started to deal with the dimensional infection, they would actively trigger the dimensional infection leak and let the entire space station fall, so that they could officially start to deal with the dimensional infection. And the left path members on this space station did not know this, except for the 3 psychics. But the 3 psychics only knew that such a thing would happen, but they were not sure of the specific time. Because it takes time for the spacecraft to arrive, and the journey in hyperspace is not smooth, any incident on the way may cause time errors and unnecessary losses. So in general, it is necessary to communicate sometime before the plan is actually implemented to prevent unexpected situations. The senior officials of Zwujing, who arranged them to do so, also made clear instructions for this. They should contact the psychics on the space station in advance before they actually arrive and implement the plan, and let them leave by spacecraft in advance. Wait until the dimensional infection is almost leaked, and then come back to cooperate in completing the cleaning of the dimensional infection. However, just 2 days ago, when he was about to contact in advance, the psychic with him stopped him. At that time, he hadn't reacted yet, and asked stupidly, "What's wrong?" The psychic's answer was just one sentence. He had a conflict with the psychic on the space station before, and he wanted people to die. The first reaction of this psychic of Zwujing was, of course, to refuse. But the psychic took out a psychic material that he needed very much, which showed that he had investigated him in advance and knew what he needed. This material could just make up for the lack of suitable psychic weapons. And the psychic said at the time, "It's just a matter of sending a message. Anyone can do it. I'm responsible for sending the message. I told you that I have sent it. You won't be responsible. Do you understand? I will take full responsibility for this matter. You just need to pretend that you don't see anything." Originally, The psychic's Jing still wanted to refuse, but the last sentence of the psychic completely overwhelmed him. Isn't it good for you to have fewer competitors? Jing, the number of psychics is not much compared to the Empire, but it is not too few either. At least there are enough psychics to support a cult force throughout the Empire. So there must be more than one psychic in each star field's leftway base, and it is common for them to quarrel and conflict over the few resources. So it is normal for the psychic to have conflicts with the psychic on the space station. So he acquiesced to the psychic's approach and did not communicate with the psychic on the space station in advance. And he also cooperated to bypass the leftway elements who should have ordered the psychic on the space station who received the arrival notice of the spacecraft to destroy the experimental containment facilities after boarding the spacecraft. He chose to use other people to infect the dimension and leak the psychic beast plan in the underground laboratory. Originally, there was no hatred between the two psychics in the underground laboratory of the planet, but there must be contact between the underground and the space station. Once one party knew, the other party would naturally know that they were coming and would definitely notify each other. The psychic finally found an opportunity to kill the psychic stationed on the space station. How could he let it go easily? And in order to prevent the two psychics on the planet from leaking evidence that the two people on the spaceship had no contact, they must die. Things happened under the influence of these circumstances. Everything was going according to the plan of the psychic. As long as the two troubles in the space station's experimental center and the deepest part of the underground laboratory develop for a period of time, the space station and the underground laboratory will fall. Without the assistance of some additional things provided by the top, even psychics will find it difficult to survive the dimensional infection and the excessive spread of psychic beasts. And the psychic will arrive at the space station after confirming that all the psychics in these two places have died, and complete the subsequent finishing work. What the two psychics on the spaceship did not expect was that an unknown psychic suddenly came to the space station. The space station sent a distress signal, saying that the resident psychic had lost contact and was suspected of death. The dimensional infection had already been triggered, and they were nearby. The space station would definitely go to the experimental center to investigate after waiting for 24 hours, and the dimensional infection would naturally break out. But in the current situation, 24 hours is enough for outsiders to search the space station twice. In order to make the plan go smoothly, they can only be forced to go to the space station. Their original intention was just to take the opportunity to kill the enemy, but if the space station was captured and more important data was leaked, it would be a big problem. They can get rid of their own people, but they can't let outsiders interfere. As for the result of their support, it was just as the left-handed psychic saw. The psychic who went to support was choked unconscious. He was a step slower in pinching the beads, and luckily he was not discovered. Instead, he almost watched the entire process of Chen Ming's violent clearing of the space station through the optical detection equipment on the spacecraft. Of course, he also saw the situation where the space station used large weapons, but it was useless, and the terrifying movement that occurred at the location of the laboratory after Chen Ming left the space station and went to the surface of the planet. When thinking of this, the left-handed psychic swallowed his saliva again and was glad again that he did not go directly to the space station. At his urging, the spaceship he was on finally started the engine and disappeared in this galaxy. 2 hours later. At this time, 5 hours had passed since Chen Ming contacted the Anti-Cult Bureau. At the edge of the galaxy, a fleet of more than 100 ships led by a cruiser finally arrived. According to the logo of the fleet's ships, this fleet belongs to the government. The fleet quickly approached the space station. In the captain's room of the flagship of this fleet, there were two people wearing local government uniforms. One was slightly fat and had a kind face. The other wore a pair of sunglasses and a mask, making it difficult to see his face. Each of them had a work card hanging on his chest. The positions were all special event handling departments in the local star field. Obviously, this was a department that was definitely related to psychics. The name on the fat man's work card was Liang Fei. The one wearing sunglasses and a mask was Li Weiqi. At first glance, you can tell that this is definitely not a real name. The two of them were watching the various devices in the command room, observing the situation of the space station. Liang Fei suddenly pointed to the sensor image of the space station in the distance and said, So it's here? It seems a little different from what I know. Li Weiqi pushed his sunglasses and asked, "Are you sure it's like?" Looking at the space station in front of them, which was obviously specially modified and torn apart, they knew that there must be something wrong here. Liang Fei's face trembled, and he smiled, then clicked a few times on the operating screen in front of him and said, "The self-guided signal light of the internal personnel port seems to be running automatically. Don't rush up. Let someone prepare the shuttle first." After issuing the order through the terminal, he picked up the phone in the captain's room, connected the communication in the command room and said, "Captain, is the newly installed equipment started?" "It is started, and the data will be uploaded to you immediately." "Understood." Liang Fei hung up the phone, looked at Li Weiqi next to him, and said, "Let's see if the equipment for detecting dimensional infection provided by the president of the Psychic Society is effective." At this time, in the center of the flagship, a device emitting weak psychic fluctuations was started with the captain's order. The matching detection equipment has a detection efficiency close to the highest point, and the detection content of this detection equipment is more biased. Immediately recorded all the data related to dimensional infection on the space station and returned it to the two people in the captain's room. Liang Fei immediately asked, "What's going on?" Li Weiqi pointed to the screen in front of him and made a slightly muffled voice through the mask. "Look at this data. This is the detection of physical traces of dimensional infection. It can be confirmed that there is dimensional infection on the space station, but the source of dimensional infection has been eliminated. I just saw traces of internal bombing by large weapons on the space station, and the location of the traces is very close to the core area of the space station." The space station said it was from the left axis, right? That should be the left axis that fired. Could it be that they are dealing with dimensional infection themselves? Liang Fei shook his head. Who knows? Anyway, I will send 2 small boats over first, turn off the anti-stealth, and send a communication to see if there is no response. The other ships are ready first. If there is a problem, just blow up the space station directly. Li Weiqi didn't say anything and acquiesced to Liang Fei's attitude. A few minutes later, the 2 ships that approached the space station first sent a communication request. This communication request was immediately responded to automatically. However, the person who responded was not a person on the space station, but a program designed by Chen Ming. It would be automatically triggered whenever there was an external communication request or when other means of accessing the space station were used to access the space station database. This program would send out a backdoor program written by Chen Ming. And the program written by Chen Ming could be used to access the encrypted parts of the space station. The 2 psychics of the government were obviously not only good at psychic-related things. After receiving the sample of the program, Liang Fei directly cracked the program that was not encrypted at all. He also gave his opinion. This is a very rigid military hacking technology, which is in line with the habits of the rough guys in the army. Was it done by someone from the army? It's hard to say. After confirming that the program was fine, Liang Fei directly used the communication to access the space station's network. And he used the new version of the backdoor program he made to hack into the most important database of the space station as soon as possible. Liang Fei suddenly said, "The database has also been tampered with. Someone has locked the write function of the database with an inner loop, so it can only be read. It is also a means of protecting the data. Can it be cracked? Yes, it will take some time, but it is not necessary. There is no need to bypass this restriction to read the data. Anyway, we are the first to come, and the information will be shared by then. It is meaningless to delete the data and eat it alone now." That's right. Liang Fei quickly read some data from the database. After a quick look, the 2 people in the captain's room were silent by the shocking experimental record data and the tragic deaths. Even if they had seen many similar things before, they would be shocked by the huge number of human experiments by Zhu Jing at first glance. But they are also professionals, and they did not forget the business they came for after the initial emotional fluctuations. Li Weiqi suddenly received a call. After he said a few words and hung up, he said to Liang Fei, "The 2 ships sent out are still sending communications, but there is no response from the space station. Something must have happened on it. Can the monitoring of the space station still be used?" "Yes." After the database was captured, The main control system and the monitoring system were, of course, the secondary and third systems that needed to be occupied. The main control system was under Liang Fei's control at this time, and the monitoring system was occupied by him as soon as he finished speaking. The broken bodies on the ground immediately caught the eyes of the two, constantly switching between monitoring, but almost all the places that could be seen were occupied by blood and fragments. It's interesting. The people on the space station should have died. Only the few structures outside are still alive. Li Weiqi felt something was wrong and asked, "No evidence can be given after death. Is this really not a massacre?" "No," Liang Fei said, and took out a document that he had just found in the database and placed in a prominent position. This is a document proving the identity of the left-wing elements. It records the time when Zhuijing members joined, the work they were responsible for, and where they were involved with Zhuijing. He took a casual look and could see many bodies of people related to the left path in the main structure of the space station where the bodies piled up like a mountain. If the person who caused the massacre was really killing people at will, then this document would not have been left in the database at all. Besides, it seems that not all the people on the space station are dead. In a corner of a surveillance screen, there were 4 living people with twisted metal shackles tied to their hands and feet, shivering in a corner that was barely not covered with blood. We have 3 tasks this time. The most important thing is to confirm whether there is really a dimensional infection and to find a way to control it if there is a dimensional infection. The second is to confirm whether the space station is related to the left path. If the space station is indeed occupied by the left path, then be prepared to control the space station in the future. The third is to confirm the identity of the person who reported the space station problem to us before, the psychic. Liang Fei said, stretched out 3 fingers, and then retracted one and said, "Dimensional infection does exist and has been controlled. The space station is confirmed to be related to the left path, and the left path members are basically all dead. Only a small number of them are in areas that have left the space station and have been controlled by people who are suspected to be civilians." Liang Fei shook his hand with only one finger still standing up. "Now we only have one last task left." Li Weiqi responded, "Confirm the identity of the psychic who reported the situation here to us." That's right. Although many surveillances on the space station have been manually deleted and covered with new content and cannot be restored, that person has carelessly omitted some backup surveillance, such as this one. Liang Fei played the video of Chen Ming just coming out of the experimental center after solving the dimensional infection. At this time, Chen Ming looked extremely manic. His eyes were slightly dull, bloodshot, and had a hint of madness. He is recorded in the space station's database. He is one of the few outsiders in the past 2 days. He should be the informant. Li Weiqi did not make a random guess about Chen Ming's identity. Instead, he stared at Wu Ping's face in the video for a while and said, "It's obvious that he just had a fight, and he seems to have violent disorder." He also cut out the photos in the video and put them into the database for retrieval. Then he saw Chen Ming suddenly burst into the crowd outside Zhuijing. Before Li Weiqi made any movement, Liang Fei suddenly said excitedly, "Wow, what's the speed? Let me replay it and calculate it. The sonic boom cloud has come out, at least supersonic. Of course I know it's supersonic. How much? 3 times." Liang Fei calculated the data on the terminal and finally erased the data and looked at the screen. Physical enhancement type psychics. This type of psychic is usually a little behind in the training of mental power. It should be violent disorder, mild. This speed. Level 4 psychics should have it? I feel so. Wait, look at him. The images in the surveillance video continued to play. After Chen Ming rushed in, a group of left-wingers immediately surrounded him, trying to kill Chen Ming with the power of self-explosion. And in the smoke of the self-explosion, Chen Ming entered the insect form. Liang Fei moved a little closer to the screen and said, "It's not a physical enhancement, but a physical mutation type of psychic. The speed, strength, and physique have increased dramatically in all aspects. He should be at the top of level 4, right? Level 5 is too difficult for physical psychics, but this guy is already good enough." Liang Fei praised Chen Ming, but as the video continued to play, his expression became a little cold. After all, Chen Ming is now slaughtering people wantonly. Although he knew that these left-wing elements deserved to die, such violent acts still made him frown. It's okay to see the corpses, but it's still uncomfortable to see the actual process of the slaughter. This guy is a bit violent. Li Weiqi, who was also watching the video of other time periods and recording it at the same time, suddenly patted Liang Fei on the shoulder and said, "Wait a minute, there is also his footage here, a little earlier. It's the surveillance of a section of the separated space station." Liang Fei turned his head immediately, and then he saw the scene of Shi Xiao threatening people with a knife in the distress signal management office, and the scene of the black hand, covered with carapace, directly crushing Shi Xiao's head. Oh! Liang Fei's impression of Chen Ming's previous violence slightly changed because of this scene of saving people. He just finished slaughtering the space station at this time. How did he get here? What is the relationship between this hostage and him? He asked 2 questions in a row, but these 2 questions obviously had to be answered by himself. We have to find that person. As he spoke, he looked at Li Weiqi and asked, "Are there any more videos?" "There's another one." "Which one?" Li Weiqi took the terminal and played a video of 7 or 8 employees playing cards in the distress signal management office during the day, and Chen Ming was among them. This is really free. So who is this person? What is his identity? How did he come here? How did he mess up the space station like this? Did you check it just now? Did you get any results? Li Weiqi pushed his sunglasses and said, "I found out that it's someone from the neighboring marginal star field." Li Weiqi got a document from his subordinates that could be found in the government archives and read the contents to Liang Fei. An Wuping, a bounty hunter who recently appeared in the fringe star field. He used to be a security guard for a security company. He disappeared when he was on a mission a few years ago and only reappeared recently. He has already defeated 2 pirate fleets since he came back, both of which were obtained by a single person, but the intelligence circulating seems to say that he relies on a set of obsolete military power armor. Liang Fei confirmed, "Military?" "Yes, a military model, Locust power armor, but the model is old, and he does have a military background." Liang Fei nodded and said, "Tell me more details." "Okay, let me start from the beginning. This Wuping was born in the Oga 2 star zone of the Oga star field, which is close to our Odin star field. He had a happy family before the age of 5, but when he was 5, his parents disappeared because they were brainwashed by the Zhuojing missionary. They can basically be considered dead. He became an orphan at the age of 5 and was sent to an orphanage by the local women and children protection organization. Zhuojing. Liang Fei muttered subconsciously and then waved his hand to signal Li Weiqi to continue. He lived in the orphanage until he was 16, which happened to be the period when the mechanical race was active. He couldn't join the army because of his left-wing background, but the conscription standards were relaxed at that time. He was also on the relaxed list because he had been cut off from his parents since he was a child. He successfully participated in the local compulsory conscription and joined the army. He was in the army for almost 10 years before he was discharged. He should have served as a low-level officer. After retiring, he joined a militarized security company with a military background. After working for a few years, he became the field team leader of this security company and was sent out. He went to an independent planet colony outside the Empire, and then all the expatriates, including him, were sent out. Missing. There is no news to be found on this kind of independent colony planet, and the information before his disappearance ends here. Liang Fei touched the stubble on his chin and said thoughtfully, "Independent colony, I haven't heard of the name for a long time. So what is the need for this kind of colony that receives imperial dividends but is not under the control of the Empire? It's more troublesome than the pirate space station. Pirate space stations can at least stuff some garbage in to prevent them from running around. This kind of place is simply the best place to breed rebellion and chaos. No one dares to rebel." Li Weiqi said with certainty. "It's just that the development law was set many years ago, and there are always loopholes in it. But the law has been patched over the years. At least now this kind of independent colony, the number of pirates is getting smaller and smaller now." "Well, I know that too. Please continue." "The information from his disappearance to his reappearance is no longer available." "What about after that?" Li Weiqi glanced at the terminal again and summarized what his subordinates had investigated. He first reappeared in a pirate space station in the neighboring Orgastar region and captured a small pirate fleet. According to the information sold to local intelligence dealers by the surviving pirates, ManhwaRecap was hiding in a frozen hibernation chamber and used a distress signal to attract them. After they salvaged the hibernation chamber, ManhwaRecap, wearing a power armor, broke in alone and killed the boss, seized the flagship and commanded the flagship to take the other ships. They were all beaten to surrender. I have no problem with him taking the ship alone. The power armor is just a cover. He has the ability to blow up the pirates' ships directly. But I don't understand why he can command a group of pirates who have just been captured by him to defeat another group of pirates. Liang Fei did not have the same idea as Li Weiqi and said, "A person who can stay in the army for 10 years and continue to work in related jobs for so many years after leaving should have this ability. And the pirates are just a group of rabble, stupid people who will work for whoever pays more. It's really a piece of cake for them to rebel and fight against their own people when their lives are about to be lost. You will know it after you see it more in the future." Li Weiqi lowered his head and continued to talk about ManhwaRecap's subsequent actions. After he took the captured fleet to the nearest pirate space station, he sold all the pirate ships and bought a heavily modified single pirate spaceship. He left the space station with a large number of pirate corpses, and then another pirate fleet immediately set its sights on him. It was mainly the pirate corpses on his ship, which could be rewarded, and the power armor. Liang Fei suddenly waved his hand at Li Weiqi and said, "I have already guessed the result. Let's not talk about the useless parts. Just talk about the important ones." "Okay." Li Weiqi agreed and continued, "After killing the pirates, ManhwaRecap stayed on the space station for half a day and then went straight back to his hometown." Hometown? Yes. When ManhwaRecap's parents disappeared, they left behind a property. When he entered the orphanage, the property left by his parents was also in his name. There were special people who were responsible for keeping it when he joined the army and retired. When ManhwaRecap started working, he exchanged his old house for a new one and lived there all the time. It was just that after he disappeared, the place where he lived happened to be demolished in the past few years. Of course, the developer would not care about a missing person, so he got nothing. When Liang Fei heard this, his expression changed to a gloomy direction. This is not a good thing. Li Weiqi understood what Liang Fei meant. In the end, someone will definitely be unlucky if they rob a psychic's property when the person is missing, and the unlucky person will definitely not be the psychic. But ManhwaRecap didn't do anything impulsive. He just stayed in his hometown for 2 days, went to the government to get a new ID card, then went to collect the bounty, and after some supplies, he came straight to this space station in our Odin star field. Liang Fei immediately compared this situation with what he had just seen Chen Ming wantonly slaughtering the Zhuojing space station and said with some dissatisfaction, "So, kind?" "Yes, he came directly here with a strong purpose. It seems that I have to change my opinion of this ManhwaRecap. He should be a decent person, but his violent disorder makes him behave like that." Liang Fei corrected his opinion of ManhwaRecap in his heart and then said, "The public security here is much better than that of the marginal star field. There seems to be no pirate activity recently. ManhwaRecap definitely has no reason to come here, unless his original intention is to go to Zhuojing. I just checked the records on the space station. ManhwaRecap's spaceship was towed into the port by the rescue team. The reason is that the spaceship crashed, the autopilot system malfunctioned in the hyperspace, and drove into the hyperspace channel cloud. If it is an ordinary spaceship, ordinary people may have this possibility, but if it is him, I don't believe that he doesn't know the hyperspace channel cloud when he comes from the military. Even if the spacecraft is autonomous, someone has to keep an eye on it, not to mention that it is a single-piloted spacecraft. I feel that he deliberately found an excuse to board this space station, and even the spacecraft log may be forged. His identity and background can prove that he absolutely hates Zhuojing. I feel that he may have obtained some clues about Zhuojing during the years he was missing outside, and he ran to find trouble with Zhuojing as soon as he came back. By the way, I remember he seemed to say that he liked the Anti-Cult Bureau." Liang Fei turned to Li Weiqi next to him and said, "Quickly check what our Anti-Cult Bureau had in the past. Nothing related to him." Li Weiqi said preparedly, "Yes, I just checked. About 20 years ago, our anti-cult bureau did take down several local Zwajing dens in an operation. At that time, in addition to arresting Zwajing elements, many missing people were rescued from Zwajing strongholds, and their families were asked to come and claim them. He may have been there, but his parents should not be there in those dens. He was still a child at that time, and he could remember it for so many years. After hearing what Li Weiqi said, Liang Fei's impression of Wu Ping was basically completely reversed. Interesting. That's all the information before he arrived at the space station, right? Yes. Well, although a lot of what happened on the space station after that was deleted in the database, we can still piece together the whole picture. After Wu Ping arrived at the space station, he contacted the people here, sneaked into the distress signal management department, figured out the environment here, and took the opportunity to modify the equipment here to block the signal. This technique of using the power generation zone equipment to generate electromagnetic interference to block communications is quite good. Wu Ping used this method to block the space station's external communications, buying him time to control the space station and played cards with others for half a day. At night, he sneaked directly into the interior of the space station, and after solving the dimensional infection, he walked out intact and killed all these left path elements. Almost no one was hurt by mistake. While he was doing these things, he hacked into the system of the space station and learned what Zwajing was doing. Finally, he went to the laboratory on the ground and planned to solve the thing called the Mind Beast project. The follow-up situation is unclear, but he has solved the dimensional infection, so the other things should not be a problem. I noticed that he obviously deleted some information related to Zwajing in the database. From his previous performance, it is definitely not to help Zwajing cover up, but he wants to personally deal with the Zwajing elements related to the information he deleted. This is all the information that Wu Ping can investigate. Liang Fei suddenly knocked on the table in front of him and asked, "Did the president of the Psychic Society say that people who have experienced dimensional infection must be marked?" "Yes." "Then it looks like our next mission is this." Liang Fei didn't say much about what might happen next and continued to talk about Wu Ping, saying, "This is all the information we can get from him and Zwajing. Can we get some clues from other aspects, such as the security company he worked for?" Li Weiqi shook his head and said, "No, the company has gone bankrupt. It went bankrupt after he disappeared. Because the company's boss also went out to carry out the mission, but in the end, only Wu Ping came back alive today. The company fell apart, and the people below were scattered all over the world. It was impossible to find his colleagues who had worked with him before." Liang Fei said with some regret, "There is really nothing we can do about it. But it's not a big problem. It is basically certain that Wu Ping awakened his psychic power and became a psychic during his disappearance. As long as we continue to investigate, we will always find more clues." Although Wu Ping looks quite cruel, he actually looks okay. You can't judge a person by his appearance. I think he is very suitable for contact. Liang Fei suddenly stopped talking halfway and pointed to the image of the planet scanned by the sensor on the screen and said, "Hey, look here. What is this?" As the planet rotated, the location of the original Zwajing laboratory, which was previously in the blind spot of the fleet's vision, finally appeared in front of the two. In a corner of the planet, there is an area with large areas of glassy substances that can be seen with the naked eye in space. What's going on with this place? If I remember correctly, this should be the laboratory that is inseparable from the space station. Liang Fei muttered to himself and immediately called up the video recording of the planet in the external monitoring of the space station. Then, he saw the light spots on the planet a few dozen minutes after Wu Ping left the space station. Both of them in the captain's room subconsciously moved closer to the screen, wanting to observe more information from the video. Is he really just a physical mutant psychic? This destructive power is close to the level of a 5th-level psychic. If it can continue to work, it must be a level 5 psychic. Li Weiqi immediately said, "I will notify someone to point the high-precision sensor there." "Well, let them record the data here first, and we will go to the field to see what the situation is."
Now.
"Of course not now. I mean, we should go to the space station first to confirm that there is no dimensional infection left on the space station, and hand the space station over to others to deal with, and then we will go to the ground." And there are people on the space station waiting for us to meet. Liang Fei and Li Weiqi arrived at the space station in the shuttle that had been prepared. After patrolling the space station full of broken corpses and flesh and blood, they sent a signal to the fleet behind after thoroughly confirming that there were no traces of dimensional infection left. People began to land on the space station and the 4 outer areas scattered from the space station to control the scene. 10 minutes later, just as the two were analyzing Chen Ming's battle based on the corpses and various traces left on the space station, someone brought Uncle Mao, who was rescued by Chen Ming before, to the two psychics. "Sir, you have brought what you asked for. Okay, you go and do your own thing first." Liang Fei picked up the work card on his chest and took a look at Uncle Mao. "Mao Xingwang, right? Can you cooperate with our work?" Not long after, Liang Fei returned to the flagship and walked into a room alone. This is a conference room. There is a holographic projection sitting in the main seat of the conference room. Liang Fei saluted him and waited quietly. The person behind the holographic projection put down the document in his hand and asked Liang Fei, "What do you think of this Whooping? Don't look at his ability, just look at this person." Liang Fei thought for a while and said, "He is very friendly. He provided us with information about the Zhuojing space station as soon as possible, and personally spent a lot of time and energy to solve almost all the troubles, leaving the easy things to us. He is crazy. He slaughtered Zhuojing elements crazily in the space station and the underground laboratory. None of the bodies of the Zhuojing elements he killed on the space station were intact, and there was not even a single body left in the laboratory. He is very calm. He investigated the entire Zhuojing space station from beginning to end without anyone noticing any abnormalities, and sorted out these situations and compiled them into a brief introduction text for anyone who is close to here to obtain. He also did not vent his anger casually when he encountered something that harmed his own interests. Even for those ordinary people who instinctively resisted him out of fear and other reasons, he would at most remove their weapons and not kill them directly. All the dead people related to him are on the Zhuojing list he investigated. I think he is a person worth winning over." The holographic projection did not comment on Liang Fei's answer, but continued to ask, "So how do you think we should win him over?" "I think we can start from 3 directions. One is to help him achieve his goal, that is, to eliminate Zhuojing. His goal is the same as ours, so we can start from here. Another is to help him cure his rage disorder. It is very painful for patients with rage disorder to suppress their violent emotions in their hearts at ordinary times. We have done in-depth research on rage disorder, and helping him relieve his pain is also a good opportunity to win him over. Another is to start with the loss he suffered during his disappearance. Although Whooping did not show any signs of it, he must have some complaints in his heart. This is also a good opportunity for us. It is best to take 3 approaches at the same time, but the first prerequisite for us to do so is to find him first." The holographic projection seemed very satisfied with Liang Fei's answer. "You and Li Weiqi will still be in charge of this mission. You must be friendly when dealing with people. His current situation is actually very dangerous. Even the early symptoms of Berserker syndrome will become more serious as he immerses himself in extreme emotions. Indiscriminate killing is actually a way for him to vent his symptoms. Although killing can relieve the pain temporarily, it will make him fall into extreme emotions and aggravate the symptoms. This is definitely not his original intention. He has been very restrained and only attacked Zhuojing, so don't stimulate him directly in this way. If Berserker syndrome really reaches the late stage of the disease, it will gradually lose its judgment ability and can be easily guided by people with ulterior motives, leading to situations we don't want to see. And I am also more worried that someone will find him before us." Liang Fei's face sank. It is obvious what kind of people will target a psychic who is affected by Berserker syndrome and slightly weak in consciousness, even if they just had a conflict. A few minutes later, Liang Fei came out of the office with only a gentle smile on his slightly fat face. He patted Li Weiqi in the corridor outside and asked, "What are you doing?" Li Weiqi shook the terminal in his hand and said, "I talked to my former colleague about Whooping. They are confirming the strength of Whooping's ability based on the video we obtained. It has been analyzed that his normal speed can directly break through 3.2 times the speed of sound. this should not be his limit. And he also has a mutation state, and the upper limit of this state is even more unknown. From the video, it can at least withstand large weapons. It can be basically confirmed that he is a level 4 psychic. Liang Fei had some doubts. Is it still only level 4? The laboratory on the planet has been burned into crystals, but the strength of Renmiexing is almost enough, right? My colleague said it's hard to say whether Enwupiing was the one who burned the glass, so let's not calculate this for now. But they still believe that it was Enwupiing who did it. Enwupiing is indeed at level 5, so they have been working overtime to study Enwupiing. The current conclusion is that Enwupiing is a comprehensive physical psychic and a more versatile one. Strength, speed, endurance, and physical strength are all at level 4 in normal conditions, and the psychic effects are both active and passive. In addition to the terrifying increase in physical ability in the mutant state, there is also the kind that can cause huge range crystallization, which is suspected the ability of high-intensity plasma. Level 5 is definitely not a problem. Liang Fei thought about what other data could be referenced by physical psychics, and then asked, is there any real reference for the direction of his mutation state? Yes, first of all, it can be confirmed that it is a crustacean, so the laboratory is currently suspecting the Thornzerg and the Aurora Wind Spirit. Isn't the Aurora Wind Spirit a giant butterfly? It is indeed a butterfly, but only the Aurora Wind Spirit can produce plasma, so they suspect this creature. Then, according to previous records, some Thornzerg have indeed shown the current state of black shells, and the strength of such shells is compared to that of other groups. Thornzerg is higher. This is just speculation at present. It will take some time to understand the details. Didn't we find some body tissue samples dropped by Enwupiing after he entered the mutant state on the space station? The genetic test results should be available in 2 days, and there will be a more detailed report. Liang Fei suddenly thought of something and said, if Enwupiing really has a double biological mutation, he should have a very high potential, right? I remember that there seemed to be a psychic with a physical mutation type of double biological mutation before. Yeah, I have an impression of it. Li Weiqi responded, the 6th level psychic of the 14th Legion, Behemoth, and Galatros are terrifying just to think about it. Liang Fei suddenly waved his hand and said, let's not talk about the rough guys in the army. Anyway, tell me when the results come out. We have to leave soon. The next mission has been assigned. We have to find this Enwupiing and contact him. Li Weiqi asked back, how can we find him? He has already run away. Liang Fei gave him a reassuring look and said, the traces of the deleted data in the space station's database can help us find him. And he has only been gone for 5 or 6 hours at most. We still have a chance to catch up. 2 days have passed since the government began tracking Chen Ming's traces. At noon 2 days later, in a colony in the Hongma, 1-star zone of the Hongma star field, which is only 1 star field away from the Kamo star field, Wuan and Hui are in the backstage box of a local bar. Hui suddenly put down his wine glass and said unhappily, I clearly felt someone was following me 2 days ago, but they suddenly disappeared yesterday, leaving me no chance to continue tracking them back. Wuan, who was leaning on the sofa next to him, explained, because there is news that a space station in Zhujiang was destroyed by a passing psychic 2 days ago, which also attracted the attention of the local government, causing Zhujiang to suffer a big loss. That psychic attracted a lot of attention from Zhujiang, so of course Zhujiang ignored you. But this also further proves the idea that the people who messed with you in Zhujiang are the same group of people who messed with you in Kaimo Star Domain. Zhujiang pretended to be you because he really wanted to drag you into Kaimo's muddy water. Then I have to wade into this muddy water even more. Hui said with an annoyed look, if I carry this identity of Zhujiang for a few more months, I will never be able to get rid of it. If they use my psychic power to appear a few more times, I will become a fake. I must participate in this matter. This is Zhujiang's conspiracy? No, an open conspiracy. Wuan and Hui have been together for so many days and know his attitude, so he didn't say much, just warned, then you have to be mentally prepared. Although we have always paid attention to the confidentiality of information, in order to deal with the dimensional infection, our actions cannot be small, and it is impossible to avoid being noticed by some guys with a keen sense of smell. Many forces have already discovered the abnormal state of Kamo star region and are currently in a state of suspicion, but as long as one person takes a step, Kamo star region will immediately it has become chaotic. And some people are spreading the news that the next destination of the psychic who destroyed the Zwajing space station is the Kamo star region, and they want to make the water more muddy. I don't know what they think, but this is not a good thing for our purpose. Hui didn't want to talk about this kind of brain-intensive matter at all, and simply said, "When I called you before, I was ready to fight with Zwajing. If you hadn't stopped me from finding the big fish in Zwajing, I would have followed the news from the government to find trouble with Zwajing." Wu comforted again. "We clearly want to catch a fish, but others obviously want to fish in troubled waters. So then I still say that, do you think it's better to kill a few minions, or do you think it's better to kill the planners? Of course, kill them all. Then you have to take the initiative. If Zwajing doesn't look for you, you have to take the initiative to find Zwajing." Hui took a sip of wine and asked, "Where should I start?" Wu did not answer directly, but mentioned another thing in advance. "There is a key point in the matter of Zwajing and the psychic I just mentioned. That is, there are traces of dimensional infection on the Zwajing space station that the psychic dismantled. The psychic dealt with the dimensional infection, but now he is heading to the place where the dimensional infection occurred." Hui did not understand what Wu meant and asked, "Isn't that very troublesome? The president and Chen Ming didn't come here. If no one pays special attention, letting this psychic go there may cause problems." Wu also agreed, "That's true. Even if there is no problem, the current movement of this psychic has made the water more muddy. Then do you want to prepare some countermeasures for this psychic? The president can't come in person, so someone has to stop him, right? It seems that the internal evaluation of this psychic in the Odin government is quite good. They seem to have started tracking that person. Why should I prepare any means?" Wu asked back, and then said, "Besides, I don't plan to wade into the muddy water of Kamo star region for the time being." Huh. Hui was a little puzzled and asked, "Everyone knows that you ran to the edge star region before to be a pendulum, but now you run back, and then run back and say you wade into muddy water? What do you mean?" "The reason I came here is because Xiao Ming is the person I chose to train. He has been involved in this matter. Even if I can't go there in person, I can't escape. I have to be where I should be." "I don't understand. Are you training him as an heir or something? Didn't I say it several times? I don't have any power. Why should I train an heir?" "You said it vaguely several times. Why?" Wu explained with a look of looking at a fool. "Because he really has potential, and he has a good temper, and it is not a loss to train him. You say that I spent time and energy to guide Xiao Ming, and finally earned a psychic like Xiao Ming to sit on the same chair with me. Is it a loss?" "It is indeed not a loss." "That's it. And there is another reason, that is, someone dares to step on my face now." Hui turned his head away guiltily after hearing this. "Why are you turning your head? I really don't know how much Zwajing spent to hire you." "Don't tell me. They gave quite a lot. They seem to have a unique way to get psychic materials. I still have some left, cough." Wu was too lazy to say anything about Hui's big mouth on some unimportant things. Anyway, he had already received enough compensation from Hui's apology. The remaining reward Hui received from Zwajing would be used as compensation for Chen Ming. There is a third reason, but I won't tell you. Anyway, since Xiao Ming is involved in this matter, I have to make a statement, but I can't really interfere. Because there are already several people of sufficient weight involved in this matter, it is not a good thing for everyone if I get involved inexplicably. Isn't it good for one more person to contribute? Then if there are enough people involved, is it a good thing for you to have one more person share the final results?" Hui shrugged and didn't continue talking. Wu was also used to Hui's lack of overall perspective. Otherwise, Hui would not have gone to Zwajing and helped him to deal with things just for a little benefit. So at least if there is something that the Empire cannot handle and is suitable for me to handle, I will intervene. If I go there in advance, it will only have the opposite effect. But you can go over and see who this psychic is who has attracted the attention that's what Jing should have given to you. Anyway, you are a missing person now, and there is a wanted warrant on you. So it doesn't matter if you are mistaken for Zwajing. Hui said embarrassedly, "But I may also be beaten to death as Zwajing, and I feel that you are saying that I am a loser in your words. If you are really a loser, you wouldn't sit at the same table with me. Since Zhujiang has focused his attention on the new psychic, you can go over and rub against the attraction of Zhujiang on him. Anyway, you can't peel off the skin of Zhujiang on your body now, so you have to do something to make others believe you, right? You just asked where to start looking for Zhujiang. Let's start from here. Just as Wu and Hu Yi were discussing their plan, Chen Ming finally entered the prosperous star field. Since the spacecraft he had picked up from the space station was in a bad state, and the fuel and supplies were not enough, he temporarily stopped at a port belonging to a colony in the prosperous star field to rest. After he actually arrived, he finally found that the prosperous star field was a little different from what he had imagined. The colonies in the prosperous star field are not necessarily highly urbanized colonies and urbanized hurried lives. This prosperous star field is often just a general term, representing the level of the overall economy. The real prosperity is more about the prosperity that penetrates everyone. Just like now, the colony where Chen Ming is currently located is a comprehensive colony, and the main characteristic industry is a large number of unique flowers and flower planting and cultivation techniques that are unique to this habitable planet. And the flowers see with different characteristics in all seasons of the year throughout the planet. This planet is therefore called the Garden Planet. After entering the port, Chen Ming arranged maintenance and supplies for the spacecraft, paid a deposit, and rented a sightseeing shuttle that can freely sail over the city. So now he can see the sea of flowers outside the city in the air, and can also see artificially planted flowers that almost cover the entire city. The feeling brought by such an environment is completely different from the crowded and barbaric feeling of the pirate space station where Chen Ming has been. This is the prosperity of the living level. Comfort, enjoyment, and tranquility. Chen Ming, who had just seen the bloody scene not long ago, relaxed his tense nerves even a little too much. Even though his life is gradually becoming stable now, he is not used to this environment. However, Chen Ming is most interested in scientific research in places like the prosperous star field. Even this kind of flower research can actually be said to be interesting to Chen Ming. It's just that the Advanced Research Institute is not accessible to an Wupiang's level of prosthesis. So Chen Ming just strolled around on this colony planet and was ready to leave immediately. Not only is he going to the Kamo star field next, but also because his identity information must have become a very sensitive information in the nearby star field after 2 days, and someone should soon be eyeing him. Although the government of the Odin star field might not be able to share his identity information with other star fields in the next 2 days, he still had to be cautious. After seeing enough of the Sea of Flowers, Chen Ming ordered the sightseeing shuttle to prepare for landing. A small screen on the shuttle was playing a news report at this time. It was about the news about the Zhujiang space station that Chen Ming had destroyed 2 days ago. Chen Ming changed the channel with some interest and found that it was not just the space station he had destroyed. There were also many reports of Zhujiang being arrested in the nearby star field. These news reports actually existed before, but in the 2 days after Chen Ming took down the space station, the news appeared more frequently. After all, there are so many news related to Zhujiang in the database of the space station. As long as it can be handled cleanly, the Odin star field can definitely be regarded as the area with the least Zhujiang for at least a period of time. It can also be seen from this that the Empire has put a lot of effort into punishing Zhujiang and has put enough pressure on Zhujiang in public opinion. After this crazy hype, the Empire should soon make a big move. The sightseeing shuttle quickly landed back at the port. Chen Ming's spaceship has been maintained, and the supplies are sufficient. Although there is no time to transform it into a single-person drive, if it is only a frigate-level spaceship, Chen Ming will have no problem driving it alone. After paying the balance to the people at the port repair factory, Chen Ming's footsteps suddenly paused, and then turned and walked towards the spaceship. Just now, he felt someone was watching him, but it was not dangerous. It might be someone from the government. Chen Ming was not sure. This efficiency was a bit exaggerated. Although he did leave traces on purpose, he was still a little surprised that the government caught up so quickly. He had to go. If he was really stopped by the government, there would be too much trouble. Chen Ming boarded the spaceship and soon disappeared in the colony. After observing for a while, through the sensor and confirming that no spaceship was tracking. Chen Ming set the spaceship's automatic cruise, picked up the terminal, found the boss's communication code, and called it. In the past 2 days, he has been digesting the power from the source of chaos. The problem from 2 days ago has not been solved to this day. The totem pole is probably what the boss said before, the consequence of a psychic using weapons and armor made of multiple psychic materials of different properties at the same time. It should be the most appropriate to ask the boss such a question. Wuan, who was just processing the intelligence sent by his subordinates, was suddenly interrupted by a phone call. Hu Yi, who was preparing a plan according to Wu An's arrangement, came over and asked, "Who called?" "Xiao Ming." Wuan ignored Hu Yi and answered the phone. "Hello." Chen Ming's voice sounded from the terminal. "Boss, I recently picked up another spiritual stone. The nature is infatuation. I want to ask if there will be any problems if these two spiritual stones with completely different properties are put together. You said before that putting psychic materials of different properties together will cause trouble. What about the spiritual stone?" The boss's face changed slightly, and he said, "You are right to ask me first. This may indeed cause problems. The characteristics of spiritual stones are very extreme, more extreme than various spiritual materials. Extreme emotions together will definitely be more dangerous. The spiritual stone you originally have is more extreme than infatuation. At least 2 levels higher. If it is not necessary, just continue to use the old spiritual stone. The new spiritual stone can be isolated with silent alloy, or it can be sold out." "I understand." Chen Ming responded and continued to ask, "What will happen if these psychic materials of different properties are put together?" The boss did not answer, but said, "I remember you asked last time. This involves some special properties of psychic energy. You don't have much contact with it now, so there is no need to tell you in advance. Will it become a special psychic creature?" The boss sat up straight from the sofa and asked, "Have you encountered it?" It can be considered as..." Chen Ming's words made the boss subconsciously automatically fill in the blanks that Chen Ming encountered this special creature in the afterglow outside the Empire. After all, Chen Ming is now in the branch of the 14th Legion in everyone's eyes. This kind of thing is definitely impossible to happen in such a place. In this case, the boss will no longer continue to hide it. "Then I'll tell you directly. As long as various psychic materials of different properties, including spiritual stones, are mixed in the same person at the same time, different properties will actively compete for the psychic fluctuations of their users. Using the body of a psychic as a battlefield for mutual attack, the most important target to be attacked is the brain. The brain of a psychic is destroyed, but the spiritual nerve will not die directly. It will also join in the fight for the right to speak. Intertwined and intertwined, different psychic fluctuations and properties will gradually merge and finally become a monster. This kind of monster is collectively called a psychotic entity. Each psychotic entity is different. They have the properties of the psychic material that cause the psychotic runaway. But each psychokinetic entity also has the same ability, which is to continue to devour more psychic qualities and transform them into its own abilities. Hearing this, Chen Ming had completely cleared up the situation on the space station. The void psychic who was originally responsible for helping with the research on the space station had a psychic weapon or equipment with a ruthless quality. The properties of these two psychic qualities happened to be quite similar. However, there were still those psychokinetic beasts in the laboratory that were created because of the obsession with the psychic stone. This psychic had been in contact with the psychokinetic beast for a long time, and many different psychic qualities counteracted in his brain, killing him. His 3 psychic qualities of spiritual awakening, ruthlessness, and obsession merged together to form the totem-shaped psychokinetic entity. Chen Ming digested it for a while and asked, "Is there any special method to deal with this kind of thing?" "The best method to deal with it? The best is to directly cover it with powerful weapons. The psychic rampage entity's characteristic of absorbing psychic fluctuations is too disgusting. It is best not to use psychics to fight it if you can. But what I can tell you is generally my experience. You can only refer to it at most. You have to ask more professional people for the method of systematically restraining the psychic rampage entity. In short, in one sentence, suppress it in the early stage and don't give it the opportunity to absorb psychic fluctuations. I know. After thanking him, Chen Ming did not hang up the phone, but asked another thing. Boss, do you have any news about Hui recently? He has been quiet since he took action last time. The boss glanced at Hui next to him and said, Not yet. I will tell you if I have. Okay. The communication ended. Chen Ming took the terminal and searched in the address book. He found Higu, who had talked before. As a member of the Psychic Research Institute, Higu has been working with the Psychic Society to deal with dimensional infection and Zhuajing in recent times. Although the president and Higu have already had contact, there is still some information about each other that needs to be notified to Chen Ming. In order to avoid wasting each other's time, Higu will directly notify Chen Ming of the news. So after the matter of the colony was over, Chen Ming would occasionally chat with Higu for a while. He shouldn't mind asking such questions. Chen Ming didn't call Higu to disturb him, but chose to send a series of messages asking questions directly. Higu responded quickly and asked Chen Ming if it mattered to get the information from him. After confirming that it was okay, he let Chen Ming ask casually. Chen Ming's question was also very simple, just one sentence. What is the use of the things dropped by the psychic runaway entity when it is killed? Chen Ming didn't wait for an answer, but waited for Higu's call. Have you encountered the psychic runaway entity? After getting Chen Ming's affirmative answer, Higu was silent for a while, then said, after the death of the psychotronic entity, it will indeed leave behind a substance that has the psychotronic entity. This substance is also a source of chaos and is very dangerous to psychics. As psychics, we should avoid having too many things with different psychic properties on our bodies. Holding this is no different from holding a bomb. Usually, it is directly disposed of, so if you can dispose of it, and never carry it with you. However, if the remnants can be preserved with silent alloy, then I can buy this thing from you. We still have a research laboratory for psychotronic entities. Of course, the most important thing is to ensure your safety. If this kind of thing is triggered, it doesn't care what kind of psychic you are. I understand. After sincerely thanking him, Chen Ming asked a question that the boss had not explained clearly just now. Is there any way to restrain this psychic rampage entity? The best way to deal with it is actually to do a good job of publicity and not let psychics take psychic materials of different properties at will. But if things have already happened and the initial psychic rampage entity has been produced, then the best way to deal with it is to cover it with firepower. Higu gave the same answer as the boss. It seems that directly bombing with large weapons is indeed the best way. However, Chen Ming also noticed a key word in Higu's words. In the early stage? Higu explained. In the early stage, the mind-running entity has at least 3 kinds of psychic fluctuations that are distinct from each other. However, once the mind-running entity is given time, these distinct psychic fluctuations will be completely intertwined and enter the middle stage. The middle stage of the mind-running entity can use only one psychic fluctuation to dispatch different psychic effects, but other psychic fluctuations still exist. And in the late stage, these psychic fluctuations will be completely integrated, no longer expressing the original psychic effects, but will generate some psychic fluctuations that humans cannot understand. Humans cannot understand? Higu immediately thought of a fairly appropriate analogy and said, for example, infrared light and ultraviolet light in the spectrum, infrasound and ultrasound in sound waves. These places all have areas that people cannot directly observe. And the effect of this chaotic psychic fluctuation is similar to this existence beyond observation, but it is more terrifying. Chaotic psychic fluctuations are composed of multiple psychic fluctuations randomly superimposed and compounded. No one can predict what effect different psychic fluctuations will have when they are completely superimposed together. If you can't understand it, you can't counter it. When you die, you may not even know how you died. Higu spoke in a serious tone. In his opinion, Chen Ming was a member of the Psychic Society. And psychics who came out of the Psychic Society's education model were different from those who came out of the Empire's normal education methods. In some things, psychics in the psychic society especially like to try it out by themselves, experience matters related to psychic power, and then summarize their experiences. Only those who have tried it themselves can make a conclusion. Although psychics cultivated in this way do surpass psychics who receive ordinary education in some abilities. Even after these psychics have reached a bottleneck in their ability development and started to learn systematic psychic knowledge, it is relatively easy to surpass psychics who have systematically studied from the beginning in all aspects. After all, those who can find their own way in such an environment are people with certain talents, and their own growth path can often be modified to the most suitable for themselves. However, when such psychics encounter some unknown things, they often have some suicidal thoughts of, "Let me see what's going on." Although these people are smart, they will prepare some backup plans before they are ready to commit suicide. But not all backup plans will work, and not all troubles can be easily dealt with. The mind-running entity is one of them. So although Chen Ming said that he had encountered it, Higu felt that he still had to warn him seriously. If Chen Ming got into trouble, it would be a major loss to the 14th Corps. But when thinking about this, Higu suddenly realized something. Chen Ming should be in the branch of the 14th Corps now. Where did he encounter the mind-running entity? After thinking about it, he couldn't think of the answer. He felt that even if he asked Chen Ming, he would not tell him, and if he did, it would be a lie. So he simply didn't ask. He just repeated what he had just said, hoping that Chen Ming would listen and not make committing suicide a habit. After he finished speaking, Chen Ming of course agreed. Anyway, he had warnings from psychic energy before doing things. He would definitely not do anything that was really dangerous, not to mention that he now had a fake body. Why would he do something that the fake body could do himself? Chen Ming did not show any suspicion of seeking death and asked casually, "Is there anything else you can say about this psychotic entity?" Higu thought for a moment and said, "Yes, there are two little-known facts that many people don't know. That is, this psychotic entity can only be transformed by humans, and ordinary creatures will not be affected even if they carry several psychic materials of different properties. Because psychic creatures do not have spiritual nerves, their own psychic properties occupy the most important part of their bodies. External existence cannot affect them at all, and different psychic properties will not occur. Active fighting in the body. Another piece of knowledge is that when there are multiple psychic properties in a psychic that are fighting each other, the psychic is basically dead. However, the remaining active psychic properties will still derive different appearances of the mind-running entity according to the original psychic situation. According to the records we have, the appearance of the mind-running entity will show different manifestations according to a person's long-term obsession, the major injuries he has experienced, or the self-awareness in the subconscious. Chen Ming's mind immediately turned. According to Higu, the style of the totem pole may represent the psychic's simple belief in Zhuojing. Those arms may also be related to the psychic's obsession or the injuries he has suffered. But the virtual psychic is dead, and there is no way to confirm it now, so there is nothing to say. Chen Ming suddenly thought of a question. Does the boss know these two little-known facts? If the boss knows that the mind-running entity can only be transformed by humans, even if the boss knew that his afterglow was distributed in various places, it seemed that he couldn't help him explain where the psychic outside the empire turned into a psychotronic entity, and he just happened to encounter it. Coincidentally, Chen Ming and the armed forces eliminated the psychotronic entity there and sent the spiritual stone back by the way. Never mind, it's okay. The boss's side was exposed, so it's not a big problem. The conversation with Higu on the psychotronic entity ended. Chen Ming immediately reviewed all the relevant key points in his mind and wrote them down. Maybe they will be useful in the future. However, he didn't hang up the phone in a hurry. He planned to take this opportunity to communicate with Higu to ask some questions about the 14th Corps. For example, one thing he had been paying more attention to before. Can the contribution points of psychics be traded? As a member of the Psychic Research Institute, Higu was very familiar with the psychics of the 14th Corps, and immediately gave Chen Ming a positive answer, yes. In fact, it was not allowed originally, but the prohibition of trading only adds an additional step of bartering when psychics conduct private transactions, so this rule was deleted later. Anyway, contribution points are basically earned by doing things, and it is the psychic's own business if they are willing to share the contribution points they earn by doing things. After Chen Ming confirmed that contribution points can be traded, he immediately asked, "Then is the Legion Psychic Research Institute purely supported by the Legion, or is it an independent department? Who determines the contribution points of psychics?" As someone who really wants to invite Chen Ming to join the Psychic Research Institute, Higu will naturally not be stingy with his time for Chen Ming's desire to learn more about the rules of the 14th Legion Psychics. He continued to explain, "Each organization's Psychic Research Institute is an independent department, but it usually gets the most support from the organization, and you should know the reason. Then the contribution points are all issued by the Legion. The people below, even the Research Institute, can only help report the achievements that can get contribution points. For example, the 2 researches you did before were reported by us, and the rewards will come soon. However, most of the things that can be exchanged for contribution points are materials stored in the warehouse of our Psychic Research Institute, and they have to be exchanged with us. These things belong to the Legion, not just the Research Institute. If the Research Institute wants to use them, it must be approved and cannot be taken casually." Chen Ming roughly understood the operating principle of the psychic contribution point mechanism. Basically, it can be said that it is a means for the Legion to control the psychics under its command. Of course, the premise is that they cannot be traded. Now, this situation where contribution points can be traded is a win-win situation that both psychics and legions can accept. "I see. Will the Corps collect some extra stuff from other places?" Higu responded, "Yes. The military supply depot often doesn't have everything. Many things have to be found by people. Acquisition is an easy way. For example, as I just told you, our laboratory needs the things left behind by the mind runaway entity. If we want to buy from you, it depends on whether you want to barter or directly choose contribution points. So do you want to trade contribution points or buy something?" "Yes." Chen Ming responded and said in detail, "I have something that should be I want to sell something that is still quite valuable in exchange for something I need." "What do you want to sell?" "A set of power armor made of pure spiritual material metal, materials of the same nature." Higu was stunned for a moment when he heard this and asked uncertainly, "What do you want to sell?" "A set of power armor. Most of the metal on it is psychic metal, and the properties are the same." Higu on the other end of the phone did not take Chen Ming's words as a lie, but seriously considered the size of common power armor and how much metal material is needed to make such a life power armor. Then he said to Chen Ming, "Wait a moment. Put down the terminal temporarily. It should be to find someone to discuss. After all, such a set of power armor is really not low in value. Many psychics may not even be able to afford a handy or even unhandy psychic weapon. So such a set of power armor should only be funded by psychic research with the official funding background of the 14th Legion." A few minutes later, Higu picked up the terminal again and asked Chen Ming, "Are you sure it's the same material?" "Yes. After all, they were all dug out from Yin Xiong, so how could they not be of the same nature? To be honest, we are quite interested in your thing." However, Higu didn't mean the power armor, but the large piece of psychic material of the same nature that was used to make the power armor. Psychic materials have never been common, and their properties are varied. Even if the properties of many materials seem to be similar, there are only slight differences. But as the total number increases, this difference will become obvious and cannot be directly applied to some large equipment for single use. Therefore, large volume psychic materials of the same nature that can be used to make a set of power armor can be said to be very rare. It is still surprising that Chen Ming can get such a thing. Higu casually guessed that it should be the product of the ruins of another civilization obtained by Chen Ming's outward exploring Yuhui fleet, or perhaps it could be found by Chen Ming in the Yuhui Star region. Of course, it is also possible that Chen Ming really dug up a vein and then directly made this psychic or into power armor. If you think so, then the psychic runaway entity may also be caused by those psychics who have a very small probability of existing in Yuhui's territory. Higu thought of a reasonable explanation, so he didn't continue to dwell on this aspect and turned to ask the question he needed to know most. Has the psychic material been made into power armor? Yes. After the boss reminded him of the use of Yin Xiong, Chen Ming asked Chao Fan to help make a set for his original body. However, Chen Ming's original body is now on the road of development with Hui Huang Chaofan and others, and has been well protected and has never encountered any danger. In addition, the boss reminded him not to wear multiple psychic equipment of different natures at the same time. And, although the effect of power armor is really good, it far exceeds the spiritual stone and psychic weapons in terms of the increase in mental power and psychic energy. But wearing power armor every day is also very uncomfortable. Chen Ming would rather get a lower bonus from psychic equipment, so the power armor is currently in a state of no use. Wait a minute. Chen Ming suddenly subconsciously hammered the table and rolled back his thoughts to the previous sentence. Something seems to be wrong. He didn't mean that the power armor was uncomfortable to wear, but the increase in external objects he got from his body. Chen Ming now has 4 spirit stones on hand: whisper, fear, obsession, and the words of madness spirit stone he brought to his fake body in the 14th Legion. The madness spirit stone on the fake body is embedded in a psychic revolver with a neutral nature. Although he himself is not very clear about the nature of his psychic energy, he vomited blood when the totem pole absorbed his psychic fluctuations before, which does not seem to be a very neutral psychic nature. These 3 different natures of psychic energy mixed together, but there was no problem like the void psychic? Even if it is because of the fake body carrying it, Chen Ming could have carried these things personally earlier. Moreover, Chen Ming embedded the spirit stone in the weapon, which was a method that the boss had specifically told him before. This embedding of an extremely negative spirit stone in a neutral weapon, doesn't it conflict with the psychic not carrying too many psychic equipment of different natures on the body? Chen Ming was used to this before, so he didn't pay attention. But now I suddenly thought of looking back. Isn't this nonsense? The boss will definitely not harm him. Is there something he doesn't know? Is it that he himself can resist the influence of the psychic properties from the 3 properties? Or is it the special nature of the resonance spirit stone? Or is it the special nature of the weapon? Or is he more special? On the other side, Higu heard Chen Ming suddenly pounding the table and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I just thought of something. Is it that if a spiritual weapon is inlaid with spiritual stones, can the effect of the weapon be improved?" Higu understood what Chen Ming meant and said, "That's right. You probably want to ask if this violates the principle of not carrying multiple psychic equipment of different properties?" "Yeah. You don't have to worry about this, because when spiritual weapons are inlaid with spiritual stones, the usual choice is to use spiritual stones that are compatible with psychics, or spiritual stones with similar properties to the effects of psychic weapons. Even if psychic weapons are not compatible with psychics for some reason, in the end, a person will only have 2 different psychic traits with relatively large differences. I just told you that the psychic rampage entity needs to have at least 3 different properties. So this situation is not very satisfying for the psychic rampage. Although the subtle nature deviations lead to the risk of soul runaway, the nature of the 3 places is much better. Reminder. So don't worry. In Chen Ming's silence, Higu continued, "The spiritual stone spirit can fluctuate in the general situation." Although Higu said so, Chen Ming had just seen a guy who became a spiritual runaway because of spiritual stones. Oh no, it seems that it is really not because of spiritual stone. That non-spiritual ability is likely to be because he is studying the soul and beast plan that he is studying in the left diameter laboratory, which causes him to contact too much with the soul, beasts that are obsessed with the characteristics. The expansion desire of the mind beast is still very strong, and it does affect the people around it. So the psychic fluctuations on the totem pole are not the psychic fluctuations of the spirit stone, but the psychic fluctuations of the mind beast. This just explains why Chen Ming found the obsession spirit stone on the mind beast, not on the totem pole. But this still cannot explain why 3 psychic fluctuations of absolutely different natures did not trigger his mind to run wild when they existed in Chen Ming himself. Is it luck? Chen Ming was not comfortable discussing this issue concerning the nature of spiritual energy with Higu, whom he had not known for too long. So he was still worried and immediately sent a message to the boss to ask. The boss's reply was to reassure Chen Ming. According to the boss, the spiritual energy material used in the Ming given by Bai Quan was a very neutral characteristic, neutral. Although the strength of this neutral spiritual material is not high, It is the most adaptable material among almost all spiritual materials. This point was not written on the certificate given by Bai Quan. Chen Ming only knew that this was a neutral material before, and he always thought it was a bit inferior. But think about it. How could Bai Quan really give him a piece of garbage? Before, the boss only knew that Chen Ming had two spiritual stones with similar properties, and spiritual stones were not easy to obtain, so he only asked Chen Ming to try to embed them. In addition, the word of madness happened to be a spiritual stone that evolved from whispering. It can be said that it is a spiritual stone of the same origin, and there will be no conflict at all. So he didn't say anything about the mental runaway entities at that time. That should be fine. Chen Ming felt that it was the special material properties of the weapon and its ability to contain that did not cause the mind to run away. If it really caused the mind to run away, he should have given a warning of danger when he obtained the next new psychic trait. Thinking of this, Chen Ming finally put his mind at ease. But he still felt something was wrong, as if he had overlooked something. But what he overlooked didn't seem to have any effect, and there was no sense of danger. Chen Ming didn't think about it for a while, so he didn't think about it anymore. He continued to talk to Higu about the topic just now, the sale of power armor. The power armor in his hand was temporarily useless, and Yin Xiong could still continue to produce psychic metal, so he planned to sell this set first and make a new one when needed in the future. So, after Chen Ming brought the topic back, he continued to sell it. If you need it, I can dismantle the power armor and make it what you need. My psychic effect can be directly restored to ensure that there will be no impact, just like a piece of psychic metal that just came out of the smelting furnace. Higu was obviously very interested in this thing. Chen Ming said that he could help deal with the materials, so he didn't pretend and said directly, "That's the best. In this case, what do you want?" Chen Ming decisively gave his needs, spirit awakening nerve. "Are you interested in this thing? For yourself? I heard that you have absorbed several of them. Try to pay attention. Many cases have proved that rashly absorbing the spirit awakening nerve is likely to cause mental problems." "I know, that's why I need it." Higu had heard about Chen Ming's deeds of chewing the spirit awakening nerve from others before, so he didn't say more. "If you have confidence, there will be no problem. How many do you need?" "It depends on how many I can replace this power armor with." "Okay," Higu said, glanced at the message sent by the director on the terminal, and then said to Chen Ming, "We can give you 2 spiritual awakening nerves." Chen Ming bargained, 2? It feels a bit too little. Then we can also give you some extra things below 5,000 contribution points. What else do you think you need? An additional 5,000 contribution points is almost at Chen Ming's bottom line. He also stopped while he was ahead. He thought about what he had seen on the website before and said, "I have seen something that seems to detect the spiritual nature of psychics, right? That thing doesn't seem to be cheap." It's just that the disposable detector sold to the outside is not cheap. But if you come to the institute to help you with a physical examination, it's free. Forget the physical examination. Chen Ming politely rejected the idea of a physical examination. It would be fun if the physical examination found that there were no spiritual awakening nerves in the brain of the prosthesis. Just this disposable equipment plus the remaining 3,000 contribution points. Okay. Higu didn't waste any words and immediately agreed. "I will go to the branch to find you in person with the chilling nerve and the equipment." With the end of the communication, time passed in a blink of an eye. Chen Ming arrived at the next scheduled supply point again. Although the supplies have not been consumed, it is definitely impossible to wait until the supplies are exhausted before replenishing. And what he did can also disrupt the possibility of the people who are tracking him to a certain extent to speculate his whereabouts based on the amount of supplies he purchased. And this time, Chen Ming also arrived at a comprehensive colony. But the scale is smaller than before, and it does not have the characteristics of a garden planet like that. It is just an ordinary colony in a prosperous star field. This time after arriving at the port, Chen Ming asked the maintenance factory to repair the spacecraft and replenish supplies as before. After paying the deposit and leaving the port, Chen Ming suddenly discovered from the billboards on the roadside that this colony seemed to have some characteristics. In the ocean of this planet, there lived a very delicious, large, starfish-like creature with multiple irregular tentacles. Because the meat of this starfish is extremely perishable and difficult to preserve, it is usually sold in canned starfish, and only locals can enjoy the freshest starfish. Chen Ming had seen it in some advertisements before, and now he happened to see it again. So he simply ran to a local restaurant to open a private room and order dishes. Like an ordinary person, he swiped the terminal and waited for the dishes to be served. However, while waiting, Chen Ming suddenly stood up, raised his fist and swung it behind him with wind pressure that was enough to cut the skin. But this punch only dispersed some black fog. A familiar voice suddenly came from the black fog floating beside him. "Do you really want to fight in this place? It's a downtown area outside." The words of the person in the black fog were clearly threatening Chen Ming. But Chen Ming didn't buy it. Without saying a word, he used his maximum strength in the small room without causing damage to the environment, trying to catch the psychic who was using the black fog. However, the black fog moved nimbly in the box, constantly transformed into phantoms, and constantly sneaked into the shadows in the room. Chen Ming felt that the effect of this psychic using the black fog psychic power was even stronger than the previous black fog psychic. This psychic power was going to be played out in his hands. Chen Ming couldn't catch him at all. At least he had to use all his strength to deal with it. It was really hard to take action in this restricted environment now. And although Chen Ming's actions were not threatened by this set of threats, the downtown area still restricted his actions to a certain extent. At least before this person who was obviously on the left side took the lead. Chen Ming could not burst out with power that could threaten the surrounding environment. Because once he did this first, Zhuojing would definitely find ways to throw dirty water on him and force him into Zhuojing's camp. Unless Zhuojing made the first move and Chen Ming fought back. But Zhuojing was not a fool. The psychic in the black fog also knew why Chen Ming was limiting his power now. So the black fog just dodged blindly and did not launch any attacks at all. Gradually, Chen Ming stopped moving. It was a pure waste of time to do so. And from the performance of this black fog, Zhuojing was not here to fight with him, but had something to say to him. After Chen Ming stopped moving, the black fog that was just running around in the box suddenly rolled through Chen Ming's body, and a human figure condensed behind Chen Ming. A very handsome man turned around and adjusted his neat suit and asked Chen Ming, "Have you had enough fun?" Although Chen Ming had never seen this face, the man's movements and the voice he just spoke had already told Chen Ming. This guy was the glass bead psychic who ran to the planet and was recorded by him when the black fog psychic was captured by him. He changed his face again. Seeing that Chen Ming did not respond, the glass bead psychic asked sarcastically, "Do you want to try again?" In such a small box, and outside is really a downtown environment, Chen Ming really has no good way to take this guy down without exerting all his abilities. So he simply gave up the idea of continuing to fight with the glass bead psychic under the restrictions of the environment, sat back in the chair, and planned to see why Zhuojingbi came to the door earlier than the government. However, his bloodshot eyes continued to scan the glass bead psychic, filled with murderous intent. "What do you want to do?" The glass bead psychic did not answer Chen Ming's question, but stared at Chen Ming's eyes and said, "You should be suffering from rage now, right? This is a disease that many psychics will suffer from, and physical psychics are more likely to suffer from it." Chen Ming was silent and did not respond. Instead, the violent aura and murderous intent on his body began to become more and more obvious. The glass bead psychic was not angry when he saw this scene, but was secretly happy in his heart. Berserk syndrome brings the desire to destroy and kill to the patient. You should be very clear about the pain caused by these two desires, right? You want to release it, but you are restricted by the rules of the empire, so you choose a compromise and kill Zhuojing. Only by killing Zhuojing and the criminal can you vent your desires without being hunted by the empire. Zhuojing deserves to die. Chen Ming's words made the glass bead psychic seem to have heard something funny. Even if Zhuojing deserves to die, he should be judged by the laws of the empire, not by some people who vent their anger to satisfy their own selfish desires. You should admit it directly. There is no need to use Zhuojing as an excuse. Massacre is massacre. You are just following your desire to kill. If you really just want to kill Zhuojing, then a psychic like you can use efficient means to kill those people as quickly as possible, instead of thinking about what to do. Killing like a wild beast. Chen Ming stared fiercely at the glass bead psychic who revealed his identity in his words and said, "Is there a possibility that I am letting you people from Zhujiang also experience the final despair of those ordinary people who are used as test subjects by you?" But the glass bead psychic didn't buy it. Pale excuses can't beautify your violent behavior. You are enjoying the feeling of killing. You are a bad person from the bottom of your heart. Oh, I didn't expect that one day, as the #1 cult of the empire, Zhujiang people can actually educate me. The glass bead psychic shook his head and said, "I'm not educating you. I just want to say, since you are pursuing this kind of killing pleasure that is completely inconsistent with the secular world, wandering on the edge of the gray area of the law, and one foot has already stepped into the black area, why don't you join us?" Question mark. Chen Ming was on the space station before. Killing Zhujiang was indeed his idea. But he just wanted to maintain his persona and vent his dissatisfaction with Zhujiang's members. So he was a little rough when he entered the insect state and did not leave a complete body. Chen Ming also recognized the name of violence. But how did Zhujiang understand his actions and invited him to join? Chen Ming did not understand for a while, but he immediately realized that this was a good opportunity. His eyes became more ferocious, and he roared in a low voice, "What do you mean?" Chen Ming's tone became more fierce, as if he was poked in a sore spot. The glass bead psychic had a smile on his face and quietly crushed a glass bead in his pocket, which had a vortex-shaped entity inside that made people uneasy, as if they would sink completely into it if they looked at it for too long. A sentence with a seductive nature came out of his mouth. "You don't actually care about the lives of ordinary people on the space station. You just want to satisfy your own desires. You call people directly and don't care about the follow-up. The status of those ordinary people in your heart is not important at all. What's important is yourself." I agree with your idea on this point. You really shouldn't care about ordinary people. They are just a weak group. Psychics are the future. Chen Ming was silent for a while. Be honest, the first two sentences are indeed correct for him. But this is not limited to the ideas of psychics, but any normal person may have an idea. Be prudent and protect yourself. Don't take the initiative to do things that you shouldn't do. Under this premise, Chen Ming also believes that there are indeed some people who are willing to pay for others. He also respects these people, but he himself is not such a person. So he did just pass the information to the Anti-Cult Bureau before and did some simple protection work within his ability. Only Uncle Mao helped him, so he wanted to save him personally. As for the third sentence, Chen Ming completely disagreed. Psychics are a rare group born based on the huge population of the empire. If there were no ordinary people, there would not be so many psychics. And the empire also has many ordinary scholars who have conducted more in-depth research on psychics than psychics. It is absolutely wrong to say that psychics do not need to care about ordinary people. This is Chen Ming's firm idea. Of course, this is not the point. The point is that Zhujiang seems to have a deep misunderstanding of him. Obviously, Chen Ming was using an Wupiang's leather case to vent his dissatisfaction with Zhujiang, but Zhujiang seemed to have a completely new understanding of his behavior and interpreted his behavior in a completely different direction. However, this indirectly shows that Zhujiang does not have too many informants in the Anti-Cult Bureau of the Odin Star region. Otherwise, they should know the video of the rescue of Uncle Mao that he left behind, and they would not have such a misunderstanding of him. But the enemy's misunderstanding may still be a good thing. This glass bead psychic definitely came with some bad ideas, because Chen Ming noticed the small movements of his hands in his pockets. The glass bead psychic didn't know that his identity had been seen through by Chen Ming, and he continued to say to Chen Ming as if he knew a lot and had been through it, "Your problems are not a problem for us. We can help you and help you kill people at will." The glass bead psychic's words were very suggestive, guiding Chen Ming in the direction of venting his anger when he was in a violent state. Chen Ming simply followed this inducement and showed a little irritability. "Zhujiang? Why? You guys deserve it?" He said 3 sentences in a hurry, as if he was angry when thinking. The glass bead psychic said confidently, "We have not been completely wiped out after so many years. Zhuajing is a cult, and everyone in the cult is a criminal. It doesn't matter if I, a psychic, kill these people casually. What did ordinary people do? Why should I kill ordinary people? Is it good for me? Let me ask you a question. The glass bead psychic said, if one day your rage is serious and there is no Zhuajing nearby, no lawbreakers, what can you do? Wait to die. Wait until the rage completely spreads to your brain. Turn you into a complete monster? Or kill some civilians to calm your anger. You killed Zhuajing just because Zhuajing happened to be within your reach, and Zhuajing's identity gave you a little psychological comfort. If there is really no other way, will you really not kill those ordinary people? Chen Ming actually does not have rage, but if such a situation really happens, he is really not sure what he will do. This reaction happened to be very suitable for ManhwaRecap's current situation, so Chen Ming fell silent and said nothing. It seems that you also know what a sick person would do. The glass bead psychic crushed another glass bead in his pocket, saying, this is not a problem of your own thoughts, but a physiological problem. You will never be able to restrain yourself. Even if you can still find some left paths to kill, what about the future? You can only turn your claws and fangs towards ordinary people who you pretended to be righteous and didn't kill before when your rage attacks, and then be targeted by the Empire. Instead of having to face two enemies in the future, why don't you take advantage of the moment to turn one enemy into your friend? Chen Ming saw another small move of the glass bead psychic, as well as the extremely weak and familiar psychic fluctuations that were wrapped around him and could not be detected without much effort. He already knew what this guy wanted to do. The glass bead psychic obviously wanted to use this psychic fluctuation to induce him, that is, brainwash him, while he was suffering from rage and his mental strength was relatively weak. Knowing this, Chen Ming's next performance was simple. I killed so many of you. Is it possible that you would let me join? The glass bead psychic immediately said, you should have checked the content in the space station database, right? Chen Ming sneered and said, backstabbing and killing your own people. You really don't mind me, an outsider, killing a few. So how can I rest assured that you won't backstab me? The glass bead psychic heard this. Not only did he not feel annoyed by being exposed, but he also thought that his guidance just now was effective. Because ManhwaRecap's words had already shown some heartbeats. Although the words were full of resistance, this also took into account what would happen after joining Zhuajing. So he continued to persuade. Compared to weak people, we obviously prefer capable people. Capable people are always guests of honor here, and psychics like you are capable people. Do you mean that the 4 psychics who died on the space station were all incapable people? How funny. As soon as Chen Ming said this, it was the turn of the glass bead psychic to not understand. ManhwaRecap meant that the psychics on the space station were killed by their own people? But didn't ManhwaRecap kill all these people himself? Has the rage disorder made his mind so mad that he couldn't think clearly? No. The glass bead psychic didn't think that ManhwaRecap was really fooled by the rage disorder now. At most, he was just a little irritable because of the rage disorder. The psychic who came back alive concealed some information. He could probably guess what the situation was. After all, many psychics who did not join the official empire and some forces belonging to the empire, but joined their Zhuajing, came here because they had committed crimes that could not be covered up by their identity as psychics. Such people gathered together, and their private struggles could not be stopped at all. So later their policy was to directly implement a more cruel training plan for these scattered psychics who joined later. Let them fight among themselves. Only those who survive the fight can get their support. Unless they are psychics who really believe in Zhuajing. So on that space station, I'm afraid that before ManhwaRecap's sudden rise, someone had fallen because of his own backstab. Otherwise, the 5 psychics in the space station and on the ground would have joined forces and would not have been completely powerless in front of ManhwaRecap. The glass bead psychic was slapped in the face as soon as he said it, but he didn't say anything and continued to say shamelessly, we respect the strong internally, and the competition is fierce. Occasionally, some people will do something inappropriate. But we have always been fair in terms of rules. Whoever is strong will get support. Chen Ming questioned, can you be considered strong if you rely on the conspiracy and trickery of external enemies to kill your own people? The glass bead psychic answered decisively, some people are alive, some are dead, and the living are the strong. But that space station and laboratory should be very important to you, right? I also know a little about dimensional infection. In such a place, there are people who stab their own people in the back. Are you, Jing, only able to recruit these trash under the siege of the Empire? Can you believe that there are no termites in a force? I only believe what I see. They are all trash, trash who can't even develop psychic energy. Chen Ming's continuous insults made the glass bead psychic feel a little unhappy, but he really had nothing to refute. At this time, he is the only psychic with a higher level in the nearby star field who can run out to perform other tasks. Most of the important psychics are gathered in Kamo star field, and the psychics in other places are indeed a bit weak. But this is not a reason for Enwupiing, a psychic of at least level 4, to bully those psychics of level 2 and 3. Just as the glass bead psychic was about to say something, Chen Ming suddenly raised his hand and said, "Let's take a step back. What's the benefit of me joining you? Killing people at will? If I really want to solve the problem of rage, I will go and tell the Empire and ask them to provide me with death row prisoners and Jing for me to kill. Will they refuse? It is reasonable and legal for me to kill Jing, and no one will hunt me down. Even those who know what I have done will applaud me. There are more capable people in Jing or in the Empire? I am not stupid." The glass bead psychic crushed the glass bead for the third time and said, "We can provide what you need, whether it is psychic materials, psychic resources, or psychic drugs. As long as you can join, we can give you all of these. You don't need to work hard to contribute to the Empire to get so much. Your ability is very suitable for us to cultivate. As long as you can join, everything is yours." This time, the effect of glass beads does not seem to be ideal. The substantive thing must be taken out in a substantive investment name. After calming down, it is not easy to deceive and induces. And the spiritual effect of the 3 glass beads he just crushed, it is also worse than 1. It is just to give Enwubbing more unnecessary pressure and disgust to the left. Then it was time to leave. Anyway, he had done what he should do, and it would depend on whether the situation would develop to their liking. That's it. It seems we can't come up with a conclusion today. Goodbye. The glass bead psychic turned decisively and pushed open the door of the box. He smiled at the waiter who just came to deliver the food and walked out. Only Chen Ming was left half leaning on the table, supporting his head with one hand, staring at the direction of departure with a gloomy face. Shortly after the glass bead psychic left, he turned into black fog again in a dark alley and instantly came to the local base some distance away from where he disappeared. He picked up the terminal and made a video call. Soon after, a gentle, honest, and somewhat simple-minded face appeared on the terminal, and a voice came asking, "Thousand Faces, how is it?" The glass bead psychic known as Thousand Faces responded, "The progress is not ideal. He has been suffering from Berserker syndrome for a long time. Although he is not very sensitive to some mental attacks, he has real resistance and is not easy to deceive directly. But the seed has been planted. The brain of a physical psychic is almost defenseless. As long as the rhythm is slowed down, he can still be affected. Later, I plan to find an opportunity to stimulate his Berserker syndrome and let him go Berserker at a critical moment. As long as he goes Berserker in a similar environment, the damage he can cause may be more exaggerated than our carefully planned attack. As long as he can't control his Berserker syndrome, then he will be forced to follow our path." The person on the other end of the phone was quite satisfied with Chimyin's approach, but there was a question. "Are you sure the seed can affect him?" "Yes, he is just a physical psychic. But I still doubt it, because the Odin star field cleared us out too quickly, and there was no time to investigate what happened in the space station and the laboratory. The space station itself is the barrier of the underground laboratory. The barrier collapsed, the laboratory lost contact, and all the information leaked out. Isn't it normal? What happened in the underground laboratory must have nothing to do with him. How did you confirm it?" "I confirmed it with this," Chinyan said, flipping his palm, and a gray-green glass bead filled with a sense of life and power condensed in his palm. When Chinyan and other high-level officials of Zhujiang reported the news, Chen Ming finally confirmed that no one was watching him around. The irritable and gloomy expression he pretended to have suddenly relaxed, and he continued to enjoy the local food sent over like nothing happened. An hour later, Chen Ming returned to the spaceship and immediately went to the mirror in the bathroom of the spaceship. The psychic from Zhujiang seemed to really treat him as a fool. Even if the words mixed with psychic fluctuations were deliberately concealed, they could not escape his vigilant defense. Not to mention that this thing directly invaded Wuping's brain. However, Wuping's brain was useless, and the psychic fluctuations acted in the wrong place. Only when these psychic fluctuations happened to act on his body surface during the invasion did they really affect him slightly, but it was just a slight impact. Chen Ming reacted immediately and resisted this influence. He also adjusted the way of replying according to the direction of this influence, so that the glass bead psychic would not notice anything unusual. However, this psychic fluctuation still left something in Wuping's mind. Chen Ming looked at the mirror in front of him. From the surface of Wuping's prosthesis, there was no problem, but there was a real sense of strangeness in his mind. Chen Ming knew the existence of this thing, but he could not analyze what Zhujiang left behind and what effect it had. But the Queen of Worms could analyze it. As the technical support for making prostheses, the Queen of Worms was also a psychic creature, so she could analyze valuable information from these things left behind. As Chen Ming's request was conveyed to the Queen of Worms, the Queen of Worms' consciousness immediately appeared on Wuping's body. After a moment, the Queen of Worms transmitted the content she analyzed through memory. The psychic residues left by the glass bead psychic will take root in the human brain like seeds, and can be re-triggered under the control of psychic energy. While triggering, these seeds can stimulate people's nerves to make people have violent desires, and affect people's consciousness to a certain extent. Of course, it will only have a slight impact on psychics, and the effect on ordinary people may be stronger. This should be the psychic power of Zhujiang's psychic who can brainwash, which was recorded by the glass bead psychic with his psychic power. Although the effect of this thing is almost non-existent for ordinary psychics, for a psychic suffering from violent disorder, a little stimulation may be fatal. Zhujiang's thoughts can be seen. But since Chen Ming has already noticed this in advance, this thing has completely lost its threat to him. Chen Ming stretched out his hand to his side, and the Queen of Insects immediately cooperated with Chen Ming to derive some body tissues. Then, using these body tissues, a brand new prosthesis that looks exactly like Wuping was created on the spot. Chen Ming's consciousness also shifted immediately, and Wuping's body was temporarily handed over to the Queen of Insects for processing. Then Chen Ming controlled the new prosthesis to move for a while, and after adapting to the new prosthesis, he stretched out his right hand again, allowing the special organ tissue used by the Queen of Insects for daily experiments to cover his right hand. Then, he opened Wuping's skull. With the cooperation of the queen worm, he took out the brain that was parasitized by the seeds and was actually useless, and then put a new brain made by the queen worm on the spot. Although Chen Ming still feels a little uncomfortable with this scene, he has done this kind of thing before when he cooperated with the queen worm to conduct prosthetic experiments, and he has done it a lot. So it's just like that, it's not a big problem. It has to be said that prostheses are sometimes very convenient, and they can be replaced and used even if they are missing arms, legs, or even a brain. Although Chen Ming can actually directly remove the spiritual energy residues that invade the brain, it is obviously a better choice to replace a new brain under the premise that the brain can be replaced at will. As for the old brain left behind, Chen Ming was not in a hurry to deal with it. Instead, he asked the queen worm to create a small hatching capsule to maintain the vitality of this brain. The seeds left by Zhujiang in this brain can't really threaten him, so if that's the case, he will take advantage of the topic to play a good role. In addition, Chen Ming took out a box from Wuping's pocket with the prosthesis he just made. This is a box made of silent alloy material collected on the space station, specially used to store 2 fear and obsession spirit stones obtained on the space station, in case what happened to the void psychic suddenly happens to him. Now, Chen Ming directly opened the box containing the fear spirit stone. The dark color of fear instantly infected the surrounding environment, but it was immediately crushed by Chen Ming's own mental power and retracted into the box. When he held the spirit stone with the newly made prosthesis, in addition to the lingering sense of fear, there was also an illusion in front of Chen Ming. in which only Wu Ping's appearance was clearly visible and the rest was a blur. In the illusion, Wu Ping's head suddenly exploded, blood and dirt were scattered all over the ground, and the illusion disappeared immediately. It was the same illusion brought by Chen Ming's whispering spirit stone, which was influenced by the dead pirate leader's mental power and turned into a false spirit stone. That is to say, next, as long as he needs to control the newly created prosthesis, he will replicate the illusion one-to-one. Then the consciousness of the psychic who only has the revenge instinct left in this fear spirit stone and can't even clearly identify Chen Ming's disguise will completely dissipate. And this spirit stone produced by the fear of his death will resonate with an enemy who actually killed him. Thinking of this, Chen Ming couldn't help but want to laugh. It just so happens that he has temporarily replaced Wu Ping's brain. Changing one is also changing two. Should he take the opportunity to do this? Without thinking too much, the answer has been determined. You can do this, but there is no rush. The existence of the resonance spirit stone should also be known by some people. The appearance of a new resonance spirit stone should be used to prove Wu Ping's death in disguise, so that everyone thinks it is a real death. Since Zhu Jing came once to try to turn him into Zhu Jing's person and left something in his brain, he will definitely come a second time and use the things in his brain to guide him to do some evil things. Even if Zhu Jing fails to guide him successfully, there will definitely be a constant stream of dirty water thrown on him. A suitable death can completely wipe out a lot of dirt on a person. As for who will hold the fear spirit stone to kill Wu Ping at that time, Chen Ming already has a suitable idea in his mind, and it is an idea that is very in line with his interests and can help him solve all problems. Chen Ming closed the box of the fear spirit stone and put the spirit stone away. The brain can definitely be kept for a while, so as not to let Zhu Jing notice the disappearance of the seed. However, Wu Ping's body can be replaced in advance. After all, the dimensional infection mark from another dimension exists on the body. The brain that was marked must have been removed and can be discarded at any time. So it's time to change the body. Chen Ming was still thinking about when to change it, and the opportunity came now. There is no benefit for him to keep the mark of dimensional infection. Even if it is used to prove his identity, it won't work, because the president has clearly told Chen Ming that there is no stable means to detect people who have experienced dimensional infection. There are only 2 samples of dimensional infection in the empire, and they have not met yet. There is no way to summarize the rules, so how can such a device be developed? So there is no harm in cleaning up the mark of dimensional infection, only benefits. In this way, Chen Ming doesn't have to worry about accidentally encountering dimensional infection after entering the Camo Star region and triggering the mark. Although the Camo Star region is unlikely to have an outbreak of dimensional infection that can endanger the entire star region, it is generally not encountered. But Chen Ming is not sure. It is better to be safe. With the help of the new prosthesis just made and the tentacles extended by the Queen of Insects, Chen Ming quickly transferred all the non-biological components on Wu Ping's body that would not be marked by dimensional infection. For safety reasons, the remaining biological components were directly discarded and remade using the Queen's ability to cut off any possibility of interaction with dimensional infection. The new prosthesis that Chen Ming had just made was quickly transformed into a new Wu Ping in just a few minutes. The original Wu Ping, who only had the basic structure left, was not in a hurry to deal with it. He could keep a little before entering Camo. Maybe it would have other uses. After finishing this matter, Chen Ming did not stay any longer. He controlled the spacecraft to leave the port and set off again. A few hours after Chen Ming left, in the private room where Chen Ming had stayed before, 2 figures, one fat and one thin, pushed the door and entered the box. The 2 people were Liang Fei and Li Weiqi. After seeing the cleaned-up private room, Liang Fei said with a somewhat unpleasant face, "Another step late, still 4 or 5 hours." Li Weiqi also looked very uncomfortable and said, Wu Ping suddenly changed his pace and ran here for supplies, which caused us to react a beat slower. This guy really has anti-tracking awareness. Let the people in front continue to track. We also have work to do here. The psychic fluctuations here are not only in Wu Ping's. Liang Fei picked up the terminal and called up the surveillance at the door of the hotel's private room. and immediately locked Chen Ming, who had never entered the private room but walked out of the private room. Someone contacted and whooping faster than us. We must speed up. For days later, Chen Ming arrived at another prosperous star colony 6 days away from Kamo Star region. The development level of this colony is more advanced than the 2 colonies Chen Ming had stayed in before, but when Chen Ming just arrived here, he felt that some places here gave him a lifeless feeling. It's as if the people here have no future. But he figured it out immediately. As he went deeper into the empire and closer to the Kamo Star region, the sequelae of the dimensional infection became more and more serious. What is the difference between a place without newborns and a place without a future? Fortunately, only some places gave him this feeling. There are still many places in this colony that have maintained a normal development trend under the efforts of the Tian Empire. At least there should be no problems in the short term. As long as the war goes smoothly later, everything will be fine. However, Chen Ming had just signed a maintenance order with the maintenance plant at the port and planned to go into the colony to spend an hour and a half to experience the local customs and practices. He suddenly noticed that the brain of An Wuping, who had been placed in a microincubator and carried with him in a backpack, suddenly moved. The psychic residues left in the brain really secreted irritating substances at this moment. In other words, Zhuojing knew his location and took action directly. And if An Wuping really fell into a frenzy in such a place, the casualties of ordinary people would be enough to beat An Wuping into the lowest level of vicious criminals. An Wuping's face suddenly darkened, and he immediately hurried back to the port. He canceled the order for spacecraft maintenance, did not even ask for the deposit, and even did not have time to replenish the supplies before setting sail and leaving the space station. On the space station, several people who had been lurking in the crowd and observing quietly communicated with each other, then integrated the information they collected and reported to their superiors. Chen Ming, who was stationed in this colony, was relieved after receiving the report. He confirmed the information, then picked up the terminal to contact others and said, An Wuping still can't let go of his hypocrisy in his heart, so he should do as we predicted and make preparations. And Chen Ming started the spacecraft and set sail. He immediately entered hyperspace with a purpose and flew towards a nearby galaxy. He had investigated nearby galaxies before, and one of them happened to be related to the Zhuojing on the space station that he had killed. There was also a space station there, but the Zhuojing on it did not evacuate. Perhaps it was because Chen Ming had not handed over all the data in the database to the Odin government before, leaving behind some Zhuojing who were brave enough not to evacuate. Or perhaps it was because this space station had other arrangements for Zhuojing. But no matter which one it was, what he was going to do next would not change. Chen Ming picked up the terminal and found the phone number of the anti-cult bureau in the local star field, intending to use the same method as in the Odin star field to ensure that someone would do the follow-up work. However, this time was slightly different from the previous one. This time, in order to prevent some accidents, such as Zhuojing might have predicted that he would go to this space station, he prepared a backup plan. So Chen Ming had to roughly estimate the time before calling the anti-cult bureau in the Binyu starfield here. The timing was right, so that the government fleet would arrive just after he had finished slaughtering the space station and he had safely retreated. Deal with the remnants of the left-handed on the space station, as well as those ordinary people who might have been kidnapped by the left-handed. Chen Ming encountered the same problem as before on the space station, but as before, he could not take the initiative to expose his psychic power to save people. The most he could do was to ensure that he would not take the initiative to harm people. At the same time, he tried to find the target as accurately as possible and handed over the task of protecting civilians to the local government. This was the situation that best met his needs. At the same time, he also made a second insurance. Chen Ming dialed the number of the Anti-Cult Bureau in the Odin Star region. Hello, this is the Anti-Cult Bureau. How can I help you? Chen Ming was slightly stunned when he heard this voice, because the person who answered the phone this time happened to be the operator who answered his call last time. Do you still remember my voice? Although I changed it, it shouldn't have changed much, right? I'll help you notify the deputy director. Thank you. Soon, the deputy director picked up the phone, and he got straight to the point and said, Mr. An Wuping? It's me. Chen Ming also restored the original voice of An Wuping, the fake body, and said, I'm not calling you this time to communicate with you or anything. I won't communicate with anyone before I achieve my goal. Then, don't ask me what my purpose is. My purpose is what you see, to kill Zhuojing. I just want to destroy Zhuojing's most important plan at the moment. I'm calling you just to inform you of something. I'll tell you, listen. The deputy director was not angry at Chen Ming's attitude. Rather, for a psychic suffering from berserker syndrome, such an attitude is already very good. You say, well, my mental state is very bad now, so I found another Zhuojing space station nearby that I had contact with in the Zhuojing space station before. I will send you the coordinates immediately. The meaning of Chen Ming's words was to tell him, the deputy director of the anti-cult bureau, that he was going to kill again. But the deputy director just listened silently at this time, without any obstruction. I don't know whether the governments of your different star regions can enforce the law across star regions, but I have notified the news. It depends on how you deal with it later. I understand, please. When the deputy director just finished speaking and wanted to say something, Chen Ming immediately interrupted him and said, I guess you still want to ask what happened at the supply place before. I'll tell you straight. The people of Zhuojing found me before your people. But my attitude is very clear. Zhuojing must die. Well, I don't have time. That's it. Goodbye. Wait a minute. We can help you heal. Before the deputy director finished speaking, Chen Ming had hung up the phone. He adjusted his body again and adapted to the psychic energy from the source of chaos. Chen Ming came to his destination in silence. This is also a galaxy located in a prosperous star field, but with few resources. There is only one mining space station responsible for collecting minerals from the asteroid belt in this galaxy, so it was also targeted by Zhuojing and infiltrated, becoming a base of Zhuojing. So Chen Ming's goal this time was very clear. At this moment, Chen Mian, who was on this space station, also used the space station sensors to observe the spaceship belonging to Wuping that had just come out of hyperspace. He certainly knew what Wuping was going to do next, but he obviously would not stop it, because this was what he wanted to see. When something happened to their space station and laboratory in the Odin star field, he knew that many places would definitely be implicated. In his opinion, those places that were not attacked by government departments and the military at the first time were either covered up by their umbrellas or lucky enough not to be discovered, but it was only a matter of time before they were attacked. So the really important places had been evacuated long ago, as long as they were not surrounded by people. Only these unimportant places continued to exist and acted as meat shields to attract firepower. By the way, when necessary, the last remaining heat was exerted. After thoroughly confirming the identity of the arriving spacecraft, Chimian picked up the terminal again and made a call. How are the preparations going? The voice of the person Chimian had talked to many times came from the phone. We have set off, but doing so will cause at least a group of people in our government to be liquidated. Is it worth it? It's okay. As long as Wuping can be pulled in, the people who are liquidated will also have their value. You are performing tasks outside, and your judgment is the most important judgment. Don't let all of us down. I know. Chimian hung up the communication and continued to wait for Chen Ming's arrival. At this moment, Chen Ming was very close to this crescent-shaped flat space station. After entering the galaxy, the spacecraft was left by Chen Ming in a dark corner of the galaxy. He himself entered the insect form and flew to the vicinity of the space station in his physical body. This mining space station is very similar to the mining space station he had been in before, so the location of the core area can be guessed. It smashed into the core of the space station like a meteorite, when the left diameter molecules surrounded it. Chen Ming also officially started this massacre. Splashing blood and broken flesh are becoming the mainstream of this space station. A small amount of metal liquid that can completely suppress psychic fluctuations infiltrated into the space station with his arrival, secretly looking for the control hub of this space station. Chimian looked at the massacre being carried out by Chen Ming, who was like a madman. Not only was he not angry, but there was a little smug look on his face. He got up and left the main control room of the space station, boarded a small shuttle, and quietly left the space station as soon as Chen Ming started the massacre. Time passed by minute by minute. Zhuojing's blood has gradually dyed every corner of the space station red. Chen Ming deliberately slowed down the speed of killing in the middle of the massacre and took the time to run a database here, so as to find an excuse for his behavior of only killing Zhujiang and not killing ordinary people. At the same time, he was always paying attention to the external observation signals of the space station inside the galaxy. To prevent Zhujiang from having other reinforcements, it is valuable for Chen Ming to devote his energy to paying attention to the situation in the galaxy. Just when his massacre of the space station was about to end, a cruiser entered the normal universe from hyperspace at the edge of the galaxy. This was a lonely cruiser with a government mark on it. But Chen Ming did not feel relieved that someone came to help him deal with Zhujiang's affairs, but suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart. This is not right. There will be no problem with his estimate of time. The local government will only come later, not earlier, not to mention such a lonely cruiser without even a fleet. Chen Ming immediately came to the outer area of the space station, ignoring all those who came to attack him. Standing in the area that was already covered by the vacuum, staring at the approaching government spacecraft. After entering the normal universe, the spacecraft began to accelerate again and flew towards the space station with a clear goal. However, just as it had flown to the range of a large weapon from the space station, its shield had begun to deploy, and the muzzle of the large weapon was also charging. The cruiser wanted to directly destroy the space station. The government paint job was just a disguise. It was a spacecraft belonging to Zhujiang, and it wanted to bury all the evidence in this galaxy. In this way, the protective measures Chen Ming had taken for the civilians on the space station would be completely useless. Wuping's actions and his thoughts would also be twisted by others into weapons to attack him, leading him to the path of Zhujiang. Zhujiang did have a backup plan, and it came a little earlier than Chen Ming thought. But this was just a cruiser, so it was not impossible to deal with it. Chen Ming was standing at the edge of the space station that had been cleaned up and confirmed to have no other living people. He half squatted on the ground in his insect form and made a gesture of exerting force. The muscles all over his body suddenly swelled. The elytra on his back opened. The biomass vents were ready to go. The terrifying force suddenly acted on the space station under him. Under the law of conservation of momentum, the space station was directly shattered by this force in the opposite direction by nearly a quarter. With the help of this force, Chen Ming rushed towards the cruiser at a speed that was completely invisible to the naked eye. This cruiser, painted with government livery, is actually controlled by Zhujiang. It is a mass-produced cruiser sold by Xinda Company, the Defender. The charging speed of the Defender's large weapons is always faster than Chen Ming's movement speed. Before he approached, 3 large weapons had already fired a large number of restraining energy bombs. However, Chen Ming had already chosen the action path before rushing out of the space station, which happened to be on the shooting path of one of the large weapons. Without any evasive action, he directly rushed towards the Defender, resisting a series of restraining energy bombs that were almost half the size of a human. Although the restraining energy bombs of the remaining 2 large weapons passed Chen Ming and bombarded the outer armor of the space station, but it also gave the weapon operator on the Defender a little psychic shock. And in the command room of this Defender, the captain in charge of command also quickly received reports from several subordinates. The energy restraint bomb of the automatic pulse laser cannon on the top was bounced off by an unknown object. However, the captain, who had known in advance the possible troubles of this trip and had just seen the scene of the energy restraint bomb being bounced off, was not shocked by the shock of the crew because it was not an unknown object. The captain gave an order to change the target of a high-precision sensor from scanning the space station to the side of their spacecraft. At the edge of the shield that had not yet been fully opened, close to the position of the ship, he saw a dark monster rushing into it with a muzzle full of energy. An automatic pulse laser cannon that was originally intact was instantly smashed by the dark monster, and a large number of mechanized structures and metal materials burst out towards the rear of the spacecraft under this impact. The energy accumulated to the extreme lost its object of action and could only overflow from the damaged and broken cross-section of the energy-conducting tube. For a time, violent arcs broke out from the gap in the cruiser that Chen Ming smashed and the damaged bearing points of large weapons. A large number of circuits were destroyed. The captain immediately gave an order to the wartime maintenance department of the spacecraft: cut off the power. Avoid battery explosion. Apart from the response from the maintenance department, the communication channel was filled with only some fearful shouts. What should we do? How the hell do I know? The quarrel on the communication channel gave the captain a headache. Even if he knew in advance the enemy they might face this time, it would be useless, and no one told him that the psychic they would face this time was a psychic who could withstand the attack of the most important large-scale weapons of the cruiser. Why should they deal with such a person who they can't even hurt? The captain felt a little depressed, but he had already gone to the battlefield, so he had to do it. It was impossible to fight hard, and it would definitely be fatal for them to be targeted and approached by a psychic who could move in space. The current situation could not be delayed, and there was only one solution: run. The captain thought of a solution calmly and gave the order immediately. Don't try to attack that guy with close-range weapons. Driver, let the engine idle first. Prepare for explosive acceleration and try to get rid of him. If you can get rid of him, start the jump and make a close-range jump. Don't give him a chance to get close again. The captain's order was quickly passed to the relevant departments. It was also passed to Chen Ming's ears. Although Chen Ming is now operating the prosthesis of Manhwa, using the psychic power of the Queen of the Zerg, but he will definitely use his own psychic power as long as it will not be exposed. And controlling a cruiser is not a difficult task for him now, and it will not expose anything at all. Just don't control the cruiser directly. So at this moment, Chen Ming can see all the movements on the defender clearly. Then he will not give this defender a chance to escape. With both fists raised to the side of his head and his right leg raised high, the Zerg's muscles accumulate the power from the Queen of the Zerg. When this force was accumulated to the extreme, Chen Ming stepped hard on the armor below the top of the defender. A violent kick. The defender sailing in the universe was displaced briefly as if it was hit by a meteorite. The ship itself also underwent a drastic deformation, from the original straightness to a V-shaped shape with 30 degrees on each side. And at the foot of Chen Ming, the cruiser-level armor of the defender has been completely shattered, and all the systems directly below have been destroyed under this impact. Almost all the left-axis crew members in the middle of the spacecraft were crushed into meat paste under this violent impact and the deformation of the spacecraft. The hull has suffered structural damage, and the front and back of the entire spacecraft have completely lost connection. Only the armor can barely maintain the general appearance of the spacecraft. Under this impact, the people in the command room also lay in a mess. Many of them can no longer get up. Only the captain barely managed to maintain his posture by using the control console in front of him. But he also hit his head on the control console, and his forehead and right eye were full of blood. The intense pain suddenly made him regain a little clarity, but his eyes were instantly covered by confusion and fear. Because the dark monster on the sensor raised its right leg again and trampled on the defender. It was less than half a minute since the defender reached the range of its automatic pulse laser. The defender was cut in half by Chen Ming's attack. The radiation energy system and energy transportation system were completely destroyed. The dissipated energy leaked and accumulated in the damaged parts of the internal lines of the hull. In just over 10 seconds, the ship that had been broken into 2 sections exploded violently, releasing a group of fireworks in space. Only a few escape pods barely escaped the spacecraft before the explosion. There were few survivors. Chen Ming was rushed back to the direction of the space station by the impact of the explosion. He did not turn back to care about the blown-up left-axis molecules. It was too troublesome to deal with those scattered left-axis molecules. Moreover, there were still some concentrated left-axis molecules waiting for him on the space station. He must choose a place where they can be easily dealt with. However, Chen Ming had just begun to adjust his posture and accelerated towards the direction of the space station. At the edge of this galaxy, another wave of activation of the hyperspace channel system appeared there. Another cruiser arrived in this galaxy. The same forged government mark, the same number of single ships, and the same left axis. This is the second one. Chen Ming remembered that in the past, the army of a star region could not mobilize the second cruiser in a short time to chase him. Left axis. Why? Fortunately, it was discovered quickly, and this cruiser had just arrived at the edge of the galaxy. He still had time. Chen Ming turned the direction of the biomass nozzle on his back and aimed it at the new cruiser. After dealing with this cruiser, he had to leave. He was originally contacting the local government at the right time. No matter how slow the local government's reaction was, it would come. The rest would be left to the government to deal with. The second left-hand cruiser, which was heading towards the space station at this time, learned the lesson of the previous cruiser. The shield had been fully deployed early, and it began to fire live ammunition at the space station in advance. With the size and orbital speed of this space station, it could not avoid attacks from any direction at all. Chen Ming also knew this and could not delay any further. Although live ammunition weapons are not ideal for structural destruction unless they are Gauss cannons, the number of live ammunition weapons cannot be underestimated. So he simply approached the cruiser at high speed, and when he passed the space station, he stepped on the space station again to gain leverage. After breaking a large piece of the space station, which had already been broken by a quarter, his speed was even higher. It is better to actively destroy a part of the space station where there are no civilians than to shoot indiscriminately from the left-hand side. The new defender also observed what was happening near the space station. However, they did not seem to react and maintained their original propulsion speed. Until Chen Ming was about to reach it at that exaggerated speed. The ship finally made new movements. It suddenly entered a short-distance jump and instantly jumped behind Chen Ming and came to the vicinity of the space station. This is the most troublesome part of the cruiser. The ability of short-distance jump can help avoid damage and launch a surprise attack to a certain extent. Fortunately, Chen Ming had just thought of this possibility. He changed his posture at the first time, and the biomass nozzle turned and began to slow down. Although it takes time to slow down and turn around, he still has a way. Chen Ming's right hand was clenched and raised behind him, and a ball of light with various colors suddenly condensed in his palm. With the experience of the last time, almost all the lethal plasmas were confined within the light ball this time. Only the light that had to be emitted due to the high-density energy aggregation was entangled around the light ball. This ball of light with dangerous colorful colors was thrown by Chen Ming at high speed to the tail of the cruiser that had just completed the jump and had not yet accelerated. Chen Ming, who had been paying attention to this scene, saw this scene and his eyes widened subconsciously. He didn't know what the thing that appeared in the palm of a physical psychic was, but he immediately thought of the little he had barely investigated about the destruction of their underground laboratory. He had previously sworn to others that ManhwaRecap's heart-gathering spirit pearl only had physical effects and no additional psychic effects of controlling large-scale energy. Unexpectedly, this boomerang came so fast and hit him in the face. Chen Ming took out the gray-green glass bead that he had extracted from ManhwaRecap's psychic fluctuations from his pocket without much thought. At this time, he could still clearly feel that this was a pure physical type of psychic fluctuation, without any trace of an energy manipulation type psychic. He hesitated for a moment before crushing the glass bead. Surrounded by the psychic fluctuation of ManhwaRecap, who was already familiar to him, his physical fitness was improving in all aspects, and the effect was very obvious. Chen Ming sensed it silently and stimulated the mutation ability in this psychic fluctuation. His body began to mutate slightly, and some gray-green shells grew on his heart, neck, and other fatal parts, and his body was thinking about some giant insect creatures approaching. This situation was similar to the mutation state of ManhwaRecap he had seen before, but there were still some differences. No, it was a very obvious difference. Because he could clearly feel that the mutation that occurred in him was not as strong as the mutation that occurred in ManhwaRecap, as if it was not even an ant on the roadside. Ants can at least bite people, and the mutation that occurred in his body now is really like a microorganism scrubbing a bath for ManhwaRecap. The strength of the spikes formed by these shells is not enough to penetrate the cruiser armor. Even slightly thicker steel plates may block such spikes. There is a very obvious gap within ManhwaRecap's mutation. However, this psychic power seems to have another ability. Earlier, it was noticed that his shoulder also produced a new organ under the influence of the mutation, which seemed to be accompanied by a new set of organs for storing something. He adapted a little and mobilized this new organ. Suddenly, some glowing plasma appeared near his shoulder, and these plasmas were reacting with the surrounding air. At this moment, Chimyun's heartbeat was close to stopping. However, he still reacted and crushed the black mist heart-gathering spirit pearl that he had kept in his pocket, turning into black mist and avoiding this terrible explosion. But when he turned around, he could only see that the spaceship he was riding and Zhuojing, who was driving the ship on it, had completely turned into fireworks. While the black mist psychic power was still working, he immediately returned to the space station and hid in a place that had been cleaned by Chen Ming. Black mist turned into a human. Chen Ming, who had just transformed back, suddenly half-knelt on the ground, coughed violently several times, and spit out a large mouthful of blood. Fortunately, because of his psychic nature, he usually does not carry anything with independent psychic properties, so he can crush multiple glass beads at the same time to use at the critical moment without triggering mental runaway. However, the impact of the plasma explosion still hurt him before he completely turned into black mist, but fortunately, this injury did not kill him completely. And his injuries were still recovering faster because of Whooping's psychic fluctuations. Chen Ming quickly got up from the ground and took out the broken gray-green glass beads in his pocket with confusion in his eyes. The psychic fluctuations on his body were weakening, and the appearance of the insect man form was gradually returning to the appearance of an ordinary person. Obviously, he had personally experienced Whooping's psychic power, but he still had many puzzles at this moment. Because the psychic energy he extracted from other people can definitely be used at his level, and the difference between them and the original body is not too big. It is not uncommon for him to use it better than the original body if he develops it well. He has also come into contact with psychics with physical mutations, and has also obtained their heart-gathering spirit beads. And the psychic fluctuations of those psychics with physical mutations, and changes back after mutation can also slightly improve his physical fitness. How come when it came to Whooping's psychic energy, it almost killed him? Chen Ming was still a little scared when he thought of what happened just now, and his eyes were fixed on the position where Chen Ming was at the moment. Although he couldn't figure out what Whooping's psychic energy was. But just using it just now can at least prove one thing. That is, their underground laboratory was destroyed and the glass was burned, and Whooping definitely intervened. In fact, if Chen Ming saw what happened to Chen Ming just now, he should be more interested. Because according to Chen Ming's understanding, the Queen's psychic power is pure physical enhancement, which should not involve the Queen's genes and the genes of the Aurora Wind Spirit, and people should not show this ability. However, Chen Ming obviously would not use this psychic power again before he understood Whooping's psychic power. And he did not have a second heart-gathering spirit pearl belonging to Whooping. Chen Ming was suddenly awakened from his thoughts by the sound of the space station being attacked. He immediately found a set of protective clothing nearby and put it on, and once again transformed into black mist and disappeared on the space station, appearing inside a shuttle that was still docked on the space station and no one had time to board. He started the shuttle and left the space station again, and in his mind, he raised the threat shown by Whooping to a higher level. After leaving the space station for a distance, Chen Ming used the terminal to contact another person. This time he only said one word, "Come." After Chen Ming ended the contact, the plasma light ball that Chen Ming had thrown before finally approached the tail of the second defender that had already carried out 2 rounds of bombing on the space station. The shield that had only protected the front had been closed after the jump just now, and reopened at the rear of the ship, blocking the light ball. But at the moment when the light ball came into contact with the shield that had just been deployed for only a few hundred square meters, the small light ball burst out with a fascinating light. The shield that was being activated and deployed was suddenly disturbed by the plasma and disappeared. In a vacuum, plasma will only react with spacecraft, and the surging and violent plasma almost instantly submerged the entire cruiser. All the signals of this ship were disconnected at this moment, and destruction was only a stone's throw away. However, Chen Ming, who saw this scene, had not had time to rejoice, and another wave of psychic energy once again jumped to the vicinity of the space station, accurately found the power generation area of the space station, and found the location of the fuel storage. The space station that Chen Ming had been protecting with great care, and the evidence of protection, were completely burned to ashes. This time, Chen Ming, who was driving the shuttle, looked at the flames of the second cruiser's explosion and the firepower of the third cruiser's bombing, and finally couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It's over. His eyes turned to Chen Ming's direction again. Although it can't be seen with the naked eye, the surging psychic energy fluctuations will not lie. He looked in that direction and took out a vortex-shaped solid glass bead from his pocket. However, the arms of the vortex in this glass bead are obviously more dense. The overall color is also more profound, and the intensity of the psychic energy fluctuations contained is also higher. Chen Ming crushed it without hesitation, and at the moment of crushing it, he said to himself, "And whooping, you didn't expect us to prepare so much for you, right? Now you can only watch the civilians protected by your hypocrisy die, and now you should be the most vulnerable moment of your heart. And the effect of my psychic energy is not just induction." Chen Ming, who was turning back, was stunned by the space station that was gradually collapsing and absolutely no one survived. He didn't feel sorry, regretful, or angry, but for some reason, his mind was a little confused. Zhuojing's cruisers came too fast, too many, and too scattered, so he had no time to stop them. In the past, the army of the Gallo, 2-star zone, came to hunt him down with a major general and a ruler. The result at that time was the death of a major general and the complete destruction of a star zone army. And now 3 cruisers were taken out so casually. What does this mean? Chen Ming couldn't say. In fact, he had already prepared to be smeared by Zhuojing and was prepared to join Zhuojing temporarily. He even wanted to take the initiative to cooperate with Zhuojing. However, it was because Zhuojing wanted too much of a pledge of allegiance, and Chen Ming couldn't do it to ordinary people, so he chose to do it to ordinary people. In this way, Zhuojing could throw dirty water if he wanted, as long as the relevant evidence of Zhuojing was thoroughly handled in the propaganda caliber, and the identity of those Zhuojing who were fooled by Chen Ming was transformed into ordinary people. Chen Ming might even go with the flow at this time. But he didn't expect that Zhuojing would kill all those who could speak out. Overestimated their bottom line? No. Chen Ming suddenly denied his own thoughts, because he knew that what he just thought was just to excuse himself. He should have thought that if he attacked a Zhuojing space station, what Zhuojing might do in the end. That is to exaggerate the damage he caused and affect civilians. They didn't even need to use any exaggeration, because according to the previous ecological observation space station, at least hundreds of civilians were lured to such a mining space station. Chen Ming's thoughts sounded good, but in fact they were all excuses for the idea that he might definitely hurt civilians by mistake. He wanted to convince himself that he caused a large number of civilian casualties in order to solve Zhuojing instead of to achieve his own goals. It was purely to satisfy his own needs. But in fact, he was a person who only cared about his own ideas. Chen Ming was in a low mood and suddenly thought of what the psychic in Zhuojing said 2 days ago. He was suddenly filled with self-blame. He seemed to be really a bit hypocritical. Chen Ming suddenly felt a little confused, because he had always been willing to protect civilians before. But his subconscious behavior actually killed a large number of civilians, right on the battlefield between Zhuojing and him. Chen Ming also suddenly felt a little tired, and he seemed to be a little tired of everything. He could feel that his situation was not right. But when he wanted to think, he couldn't get rid of the vicious circle of thinking about how bad his behavior was. Chen Ming felt that he had a lot of depression in his heart, but he had no place to vent or talk. This feeling made him extremely uncomfortable. Just when Chen Ming was struggling in his heart, he suddenly thought of something, stopped all his actions, and stopped controlling and whooping. Instead, he used the prosthesis of the 14th core to call Bai Quan psychological problems, especially those involving Zhuojing and civilians. The first person Chen Ming thought of who could help him solve was Bai Quan. Bai Quan answered Chen Ming's call as usual. Before Bai Quan asked, Chen Ming said, "Let me ask you something. If you need to sacrifice a group of people to achieve your goal, will you sacrifice them?" Bai Quan's mind was full of question marks because of Chen Ming's sudden and inexplicable question, but he still answered seriously, "If it's a battlefield, of course I will." Why ask this? Just asking, what if it's not a battlefield? If it's not a battlefield, it depends on the situation. It depends on whether what I do is in line with my values when sacrificing a group of people. Chen Ming gave an example. For example, there is a Zwajing space station has kidnapped civilians. If you dare to approach them, you will explode. Will you sacrifice these civilians to kill these Zwajing? Yes. Bai Quan answered without hesitation. As long as the purpose I want to achieve is not for myself, I will not hesitate. Did you encounter something? Or did your president encounter any problems with Kamo? It's just that something suddenly occurred to me, so I want to ask. Really? Bai Quan didn't believe that Chen Ming would think of such a question inexplicably when he was staying in the branch honestly. He could guess casually that Chen Ming must have been secretly using his psychic power to do something, and then he happened to encounter a similar situation and came to ask. Nowadays, bionic technology is so advanced that it is not difficult to spend some effort to make a robot that looks exactly like a human. As far as he knows, there are indeed people in the Empire who specialize in manufacturing and producing such bionic robots to accompany themselves. Especially in the prosperous starfield, such robots are not too rare. Therefore, if Chen Ming's psychic power controls such a bionic robot and drives a spaceship by himself, it is generally impossible to distinguish. Even if he had not secretly asked someone to do an accurate body scan and obtain hair samples for DNA testing when Chen Ming came to the branch, he would even suspect that Chen Ming in the branch was fake. Chen Ming was embarrassed for a while when he heard Bai Quan's suspicion. The psychic effect he showed had been analyzed by others a long time ago, and even before that, Bai Quan was the first person to analyze his psychic effect from the clues of his actions. Therefore, the concept of using psychic power to create a mechanical clone must have been thought of by others a long time ago, and even the think tank that Bai Quan arranged for him had such an idea in advance. However, Bai Quan certainly didn't know about the Zerg. But this was enough for Bai Quan to think that Chen Ming was doing something outside. Of course, it didn't matter to Bai Quan what Chen Ming was doing now. Anyway, it was probably that he was controlling some robots or some self-driving spaceships to run around the Empire, and then accidentally encountered something similar to what he just said. Recently, there have been incidents related to Zwajing everywhere in the Empire. It is impossible to guess where Chen Ming controlled the robot to go. Although there is a main suspect, Kamo Star region, the situation there is also extremely complicated. The main direction of the 14th Legion is still the war between the Mechanical Clan and Yuhui. The internal affairs are handed over to other legions to handle, so there is not much attention, and it is indeed not very clear. But no matter what, as long as Chen Ming does not violate the rule that is not written out in writing, it will be fine. In other words, do not use psychic power to control things that do not belong to Chen Ming. Even if Chen Ming is now clearly asking questions about this, and it is obvious that he is staying in the branch and controlling the robot or spaceship outside, Bai Quan still believes that Chen Ming can abide by the bottom line of reassuring people. Of course, he is at ease, and there are always people who don't think so. So Bai Quan has been trying his best to protect Chen Ming, and occasionally hinted to Chen Ming during class. Chen Ming is certainly not stupid. He knows exactly how strong his psychic power is and how many people will be worried. It is also fortunate that his psychic power can only be expanded through personal contact and indirect contact with the afterglow. Otherwise, there will definitely be more people trying their best to restrict him. So he has always been very cooperative. At least the prosthesis of the 14th Legion is very cooperative. All the afterglow cores brought by the prosthesis to the 14th Legion are clearly placed in front of Bai Quan for supervision. The only other fleet with afterglow cores is the small-scale fleet that has been wandering in the Gallo Star field to earn pocket money. Because Chen Ming does things clearly, Bai Quan is not worried about what Chen Ming is up to now, and answered purely from the heart. Let me put it this way, even I am an object that can be sacrificed when necessary in my eyes. For example, if I sacrifice now, I can get rid of the mechanical race, Zwajing or afterglow. I am willing to sacrifice now. Bai Quan said it openly, and Chen Ming believed that Bai Quan would really do it, but he was not Bai Quan, and he would definitely have different ideas when thinking about some things. He wanted to rely on Bai Quan's ideas to make a reference for the dilemma he was facing now. What if it is not for this goal, but a more personal goal? For example, you are not the government army that encircled Zwajing in the past, but an ordinary person who has a grudge against Zwajing. Bai Quan further confirmed his guess that Chen Ming was controlling some kind of robot to run around the Empire and cause trouble for Zwajing, and said, Is this question different from the previous one? Can't you put your personal goal on such a big goal? Your goal is to kill Zhujiang, and the goal of those who encircled Zhujiang is also to kill Zhujiang. The same goal, put the two things together and see if different ideas and processes will lead to the same result. If the result is the same, then do it. Sacrifice cannot be avoided, so try to minimize the number of sacrifices. In the Empire, human life is equal, at least to some extent, and more people cannot be sacrificed to save one person. Chen Ming asked again, what if the number of casualties among civilians in these two choices is different? What is the key to this operation? Is it to rescue civilians? Or to eliminate Zhujiang? There is always a main goal. If it is to eliminate Zhujiang, then I can only say that it is unfortunate to the civilians and express my sincere apologies and compensation to their families. If it is to protect civilians, I only have one sentence. When it is really necessary, sacrifice is just a number. Chen Ming asked the question he wanted to ask the most at this point. But who will take this responsibility? Take responsibility? Are you worried about this? Bai Quan asked back. After thinking about it, I found that this seemed to be a problem for Chen Ming. Chen Ming did work as a manager, but he was an ordinary manager who only managed dozens of people at most and never really involved a large number of lives. If he really had to take the responsibility for the deaths of so many people, the psychological pressure would be much greater than directly killing the same people. Chen Ming had killed people, but they were all enemies. Not everyone has the mental quality to cause the death of a large number of ordinary people who have no hostile relationship with him because of his own actions. This situation made Bai Quan wonder what happened in which part of the empire that would require Chen Ming to bear this pressure. However, as before, the current situation in the empire is that Zhujiang is being besieged everywhere. It is really hard to say which star field or galaxy has such a thing happened again. So Bai Quan simply said directly, you have to think clearly about who killed them, you or Zhujiang. Tracing back to the source, is it you who caused this situation, or is Zhujiang who caused this situation, who killed them? As for the responsibility, I will say it bluntly. In the example just now, unless you directly transformed into Zhujiang and rushed into the space station to massacre civilians, otherwise it has nothing to do with you if all these people died, and you don't have to bear any responsibility. It's that simple. Chen Ming has roughly understood what Bai Quan meant. The confusion in his heart gradually dissipated, and he finally got out of the vicious circle of self-blame. Chen Ming relaxed a little and complained to Bai Quan, it's a bit ruthless. It's true, but this is my experience of surviving on the battlefield. Of course, my mentality has changed after I came down from the front line. When I really encounter multiple choice questions, I might be confused for a while. Oh, by the way, let me ask you something. How is Xinghai's teaching recently? Chen Ming suddenly coughed and said, it's okay. I have something else to do. Let's talk later. When it comes to embarrassing topics, Chen Ming didn't know what to say. Chang Xinghai had already started teaching him 2 days ago. It was okay at the beginning, but Chen Ming always felt weird during the class later. No matter how he thought about it, he had a headache, so he simply stopped thinking about it. He still has things to do now. The communication ended. Chen Ming's mentality finally returned to normal. He asked himself a question in his heart. What was the purpose of letting in Whooping go? It was to cooperate with the president, provide support to the president, help find the psychic who made him discover that Zhujiang was also infected by the dimension, and then solve the huge trouble in Kamo Star region. And the purpose of his coming to this space station halfway. It was because Zhujiang had ideas about him, and he also wanted to take the opportunity to try to sneak into Zhujiang, and try to disintegrate them from the inside of Zhujiang. That was enough. Chen Ming did not take the initiative to massacre civilians, but Zhujiang pressed the weapon launch button, and he did not need to blame himself for it. You must know that once Kayamo has a problem, the more severe consequences caused by the dimensional infection may affect the entire empire. It is equivalent to sacrificing a small group of people in exchange for the survival opportunities of a larger group of people. It can be said that this is too utilitarian. But in Chen Ming's view, this is also a solution that will not cause the greatest loss in the shortest time. If he really feels sorry, Chen Ming will go back to build a monument for them and give their families some compensation. I believe that the Empire will definitely not be stingy with these compensations. Chen Ming put down this pressure in his heart. In reality, Wu Ping, who was drifting in the cosmic environment, finally moved. He adjusted his posture and faced the position of the third left-hand cruiser that had just appeared and destroyed the space station. The gorgeous colors instantly condensed into a plasma sphere in his hand. Even faster than before in the underground laboratory, the energy gathered in the plasma sphere was accumulated to the intensity close to the plasma light ball that destroyed his mind-destroying entity. After solving the trouble in his heart, Chen Ming even became more adept at controlling the Queen's psychic power and in Wu Ping's body. At this moment, his fury reached its peak, and this time it was not a disguise, but he really vented the anger accumulated in his heart because of his previous thoughts. The gorgeous color of the plasma sphere has gradually turned into pure white with energy condensed to the extreme, and it is gradually covered by the Zerg keratin wrapped outside the sphere by Chen Ming, allowing it to be held more firmly in his hand. At the moment the spear was thrown out of Chen Ming's hand, the carapace covering the plasma broke because it could not withstand the terrifying acceleration, revealing the glow of the plasma again. I saw a flash of lightning in the galaxy. The third cruiser from the left channel, along with its shield, it was pierced from head to tail by this lightning. At the moment the lightning penetrated the tail of the cruiser, the lightning disappeared. The colorful colors representing death completely enveloped the spacecraft. In just a few seconds, it was annihilated in the light. Seeing this scene, Chen Ming's depression was swept away. He adjusted his posture and leaned against the biomass vent to the vicinity of the destroyed space station with only wreckage left. The space station had been destroyed and broken into pieces, and Chen Ming fell on the largest piece of the space station wreckage. He was digging around and found the location where the escape pods were concentrated, trying to find the living people. Of course, he also knew that it was impossible for anyone to survive the power of the entire space station being destroyed. He was just pretending and waiting for someone. Soon, the people Chen Ming was waiting for came. Chen Mian, wearing a protective suit, floated out from the shadow of the space station wreckage. His face under the mask of the protective suit was a little ugly, because he had noticed that the high-intensity heart-gathering spirit bead that he had just crushed, which cost him a lot of energy to make, did not seem to have a good effect. And Wu Ping in front of him did not look like his mental loophole had been broken, only the rage caused by his Berserker syndrome. Did the Berserker syndrome protect the mental loophole from interference to a certain extent? Chimian was not sure, but he did not show it. He just threw a terminal to Chen Ming, on which a program for two-way conversion of voice and text was running. Chen Ming took it. He was now extremely calm, but he continued to control Wu Ping's body and showed a surging killing intent. The mental power that should have only acted on himself was overflowing crazily, and even the seeds left by Zhu Jing in his brain in the backpack he carried with him were completely dispersed. Even Chen Ming felt that a trace of psychic fluctuations from the brainwashed psychic on his body were completely killed. Chen Ming was slightly stunned when he sensed this psychic fluctuation in his consciousness. He did not notice that his consciousness was still affected by this special psychic fluctuation that had the effect of bewitching people. Although there was no obvious feeling, only a very subtle impact. But it seems that it was this influence that made him confused just now. This spirit could find the weakest part of his soul and magnify his weakness. He, who was friendly to civilians, had a mental hole because of the death of civilians. Chen Ming thought that what he thought just now was really his own idea. No, it should be considered as such. Because under normal circumstances, although Chen Ming would not blame himself too much when facing the death of a large number of civilians, he would indeed feel a little uncomfortable, but he would not have such a big reaction. His previous reaction was purely magnified by his mental hole. A 1,000-mile dam is destroyed by an ant hole. Any small problem may lead to a disaster at a critical moment. But it doesn't matter now. After Baichuan's guidance, Chen Ming would no longer be restricted by any universal ethics and morals in such major events involving the entire empire. Everything would only serve to achieve the goal. His mind became more resolute after this attack on his mental loophole. Chen Yin was in front of Chen Ming at this time. Of course, he could also feel that Chen Ming relied on the surging psychic fluctuations to disperse the seeds in his brain. However, it didn't matter whether the seed mark was there or not at this time. Chen Yin stretched out his left hand with a missing little finger, pointed at the collapsed space station under his feet, and said, "We accept your pledge of allegiance." Soon the news of what happened on the space station will be placed on the meeting table of the local government. But no one will know that there are our people on the space station, and no one will know that what you are doing is actually helping them. We will help you build momentum, and you will be a madman who kills indiscriminately because of rage. It's useless for you to be angry now. It doesn't matter how psychics conflict with each other. But once it involves civilians, it's still for civilians. If you carry out massacres, it is hard to say whether you, a psychic, are still a psychic in the eyes of the Empire. You will definitely be on the Empire's blacklist, and it is impossible for you to act freely in the prosperous star field with your identity. For you, even if your mental state barely recovers to normal, what will happen next? What if the rage becomes more serious? What else can you do? You don't still think you can find our territory in the Empire at will, do you? For a psychic with rage in the Empire, the best outcome is to be a harmless guinea pig in a mental hospital. Chen Yin's words obviously have a lot of exaggeration, but what he said about Zhuo Jing is indeed correct. Zhuo Jing will definitely put the blame on Chen Ming for the small number of civilian casualties on the space station, and it is even possible that they will use the people hidden in some departments to put the blame on Chen Ming. Chen Ming has a targeted method in his hand, because he has a complete video of everything that happened here. He also saved all the data in the database of the space station. The destruction of the space station did not affect his data preservation at all. If he really wanted to pass on the blame, he only needed to hand over the video. But Chen Ming did not intend to do so. He had more ideas. Chen Ming continued his performance. He pretended to be extremely angry, stepped forward and grabbed the collar of Chen Yin's protective suit, and said with his own voice as a medium, "I have another choice, which is to kill you here." Chen Yin did not make any excited resistance. After all, if Whooping wanted to take action, he could just do it directly, and there was no need to drag him to talk. And Whooping's violent disorder had obviously been stimulated to the extreme. If he continued to force him, it would be counterproductive if he forced him too hard. So Chen Yin relaxed his tone and said, "In fact, there is another option. We can cooperate temporarily, only for the next period of time. I know that your understanding of us is negative and you are unwilling to contact us, but you must know that rage is the sword of Damocles hanging over your head. Other people in the Empire have to consider what will happen after you get sick and be wary of you. But we are different. We have the means to completely cure rage. This is a fair deal. You work hard and we help you treat it. When you are cured, you can find a way to have plastic surgery, change your appearance, and return to the Empire. In this era, if psychics like us really don't want to do it one day, find a place to have plastic surgery, hide, and don't cause trouble, who can find us?" Chen Ming didn't show more irritability, but let go of his hand, took a step back, lowered his head slightly, and looked thoughtful. But he suddenly raised his head again and asked, "Your psychic power gives you the ability to change your face, so why don't you repair your little finger?" Chen Ming pretended that he still needed time to think, so he temporarily changed the topic and raised this question. Of course, this is indeed what Chen Ming is more curious about. Because before, when he saw the glass bead psychic in the place where the black fog psychic was captured, his little finger was also missing and not repaired. It is obvious that modern medical technology can easily regenerate a finger. If it doesn't work, the mechanical finger is the same. Then why doesn't this guy repair it? Chen Yin raised his left hand and looked at it and said, "This has to be traced back to the past, which is not what we are going to talk about now. Think about it carefully. We still have time. You have to think about how many ways you can go now." Chen Ming completely stopped looking ahead and leaned back on the wreckage of the space station. Chen Yin picked up the terminal that Chen Ming had just thrown away and put it back in Whooping's hand. He looked up at the pair of scarlet eyes on top of the tall body and said, "We are not as crazy as you look. At least we have always been communicating with you in a friendly manner before, And it is the same now, isn't it? Chimyin's friendly communication made Chen Ming a little nervous for a moment, and he asked back, does friendly communication mean that I am accused of massacring civilians? Hearing this, Chimyin shrugged and said, we did not take the initiative to pass the buck. In fact, we only did what we have been doing, causing damage to a space station of the Empire. It just happened that you chose to destroy us first and collided with our goal. Aren't we still helping you? Help you kill all the Zwajings on the space station that you didn't kill. As for how the Empire will look at you in the future, isn't it because of your own actions that led to the current situation? If you don't attack us, there won't be so many things. What Chimyin said is indeed nothing wrong at first glance for someone who doesn't know the whole picture. Zwajing is a villain who is causing damage to the Empire, and he did help Chen Ming kill all the Zwajings he wanted to kill. It is even true that Chen Ming chose this space station to lead to the current situation. All true. But only telling half the truth can sometimes even cause a bigger error than telling a lie. Of course, for Chen Ming, who knew that the guy in front of him had planted the seeds of inducing rage and whooping and attacked his own spiritual weaknesses. What the bastard said just now is bullshit. And Chen Ming never believed that Zwajing would be kind to people and would really have friendly exchanges. Because the source of his dislike for Zwajing was all caused by seeing Zwajing's outrageous actions with his own eyes. But at this time, Chen Ming pretended to think seriously and said, I have never heard that rage can be treated. It has always been relieved. Chimyin stretched out his index finger and shook it at Chen Ming. No, no, no. In fact, there is a drug that can directly act on your brain and neutralize the substances that cause rage secreted in your brain when rage attacks. As long as you can take it for a long time, you can completely erase these substances and protect your brain. There is another quick way, which is to directly extract the substance through surgery. What do you think? Chimyin's words are indeed very tempting under normal circumstances, but Chen Ming continued to consider Wuping's reaction and said, what the Empire can't do, how can you do it? The Empire doesn't have as many experimental subjects as we do. Chen Ming was silent for a long time and finally said, where is the medicine? Chimyin smiled and took out a small bottle of medicine that had been prepared long ago from his pocket. There was no label on the bottle. Since they helped Wuping prepare the letter of surrender, they would naturally prepare what they should give after the letter of surrender was handed in. Just take it orally. The medicine will take effect in about an hour. If you can speed up blood flow and promote absorption, it will be faster. Chen Ming took the bottle of medicine, stuffed the whole bottle into his mouth, and swallowed it directly. The stomach tissue immediately extracted and stored the medicine in the glass bottle and handed it over to the queen worm to extract and analyze the composition of the medicine. On the other side of the 14th Legion's fake body, Chen Ming immediately used the authority of the 14th Legion to query the drugs related to these ingredients, and the results came out quickly. As expected, this drug was not developed by Zwajing at all, but by the Empire. And the organization that developed this drug was the Fanchao Research Institute. This was not Zwajing's patent at all, nor was it a research result of Zwajing's unscrupulous human experiments. It was an inhibitory drug developed by the Fanchao Research Institute in recent years based on various animals infected with rage. Zwajing secretly obtained this drug. It is not known whether they stole the finished product or stole the ingredient list and copied the drug themselves. Finally, they brought it to him to deceive him. It can only be said that just a few hours ago, when Chen Ming called the Anti-Cult Bureau of the Odin Star region, the deputy director said that they could help with the treatment. Although Chen Ming hung up the phone before and didn't finish listening, the treatment the deputy director mentioned was obviously the treatment of rage. It was precisely because of the deputy director's words that Chen Ming would try to let the fake body search for information at the first time. In the end, he really found something. The Empire was indeed infiltrated by Zwajing in many places. Although it was not necessarily the Fanchao Institute, but the people who conducted drug experiments in the Fanchao Institute or some other related collaborators who were infiltrated, this is indeed a problem. The brainwashing psychic power that acts on ordinary people and is difficult for psychics to detect is really a troublesome thing. Of course, Chen Ming does not need to consider the affairs of Zwajing and the Empire now. He only needs to consider the present. The glass bead psychic in front of him did give him the medicine to cure rage. According to the reports occasionally released by the Fanchao Research Institute, it can be seen that this thing is indeed effective. After the effect was achieved on animals, a small-scale clinical trial with approval was started. It just hasn't been used on a large scale yet. And through the inspection of the queen worm, the ingredients of the medicine he just took are indeed fine. Zhuojing didn't do anything small. It's the same as the ingredients disclosed in an archive that requires certain permissions to view. After all, in Zhuojing's eyes, ManhwaRecap is at least a physical psychic. What he is least afraid of is targeting the body, whether it is poison or something else. There is no need to make trouble in such a place. After Chen Ming confirmed that the medicine was completely fine, he let ManhwaRecap's body start to absorb the medicine. There is a little bit of material in the material of this medicine. There is no harm in absorbing it, but there is no benefit because Chen Ming found out after absorbing it that this medicine is completely acting on the brain, and all the ingredients are used to protect the brain after being absorbed. However, ManhwaRecap's brain is just a decoration, so this medicine is useless. But it's not a big problem. He doesn't suffer from berserk syndrome, so it doesn't matter if he lacks this little thing. Just pretend when it's time. As ManhwaRecap's body absorbs the medicine, the violent aura on his body gradually subsides. After feeling that ManhwaRecap is no longer in a violent state, Chen Ming also repeated what he said just now. We just need you to cooperate with us temporarily. Just treat it as a temporary cooperation. We treat you, you work hard, and when you are done with the treatment, you leave. It's a very simple deal, right? Of course, Chen Ming can't actually let ManhwaRecap go casually. There are still various means waiting for him. It's just that he said so now. Chen Ming knows this very well. Chen Ming actually knows that Chen Ming knows this very well. It's just that he is confident that ManhwaRecap will stay completely after joining. Chen Ming also has the confidence that after joining Zhuojing, he can turn Zhuojing upside down from the inside. Both of them have their own ulterior motives, and it depends on who is more capable. Anyway, for Chen Ming, since Zhuojing has misjudged him, they will soon experience what pain is. Chen Ming stopped thinking about it and asked directly, "What do you want me to do?" Chen Ming didn't rush to say it, but stepped forward and stretched out his hand. "Happy cooperation? Just call me Chen Ming." Chen Ming withdrew from the insect form, gradually restored to human form, and stretched out his hand to hold it. However, just when he just held Chen Ming's hand, he suddenly exerted force and swung it violently, trying to smash Chen Ming into the wreckage of the space station. Halfway through the swing, a ball of black mist exploded on Chen Ming's body. Chen Ming escaped from Chen Ming's hand and soon emerged again in the shadow next to him, unscathed. ManhwaRecap was obviously still hostile to Zhuojing, but the violent aura on his body had indeed been completely restrained. Chen Ming sensed this, so he just patted his protective suit to get rid of the ash that had just been stained and asked, "Have you calmed down? You can see my ability. I want to go easily. There is no point in threatening me with violence." Chen Ming leaned against the wall next to him that had not been destroyed and collapsed, lowered his head and stopped talking. Chen Ming was not angry even though he didn't wait for Chen Ming's reply. Instead, he said, "It's okay if you calm down. Then listen to the content of our cooperation. We need you to go to Kamo Star region." Chen Ming turned his head and looked at Chen Ming again. "That's where I was going. But you went there to oppose us, and now you can help us. What do you want me to do?" "There is a very important laboratory. Keep an eye on it, and don't let anyone get close." Chen Ming accepted it silently, but he had a question in his heart. Is this laboratory really important? If it was really important, he shouldn't have been told about the existence of this place casually, nor should he be asked to guard it as a psychic who had just been forced to join Zhuojing. Chen Ming thought so, of course without saying a word. He even followed Chen Ming onto his shuttle. He arrived at a Zhuojing destroyer that came to pick him up and left the galaxy. And in this galaxy with only wreckage left, for some reason no government officials arrived. One day later, the president's phone suddenly came to Chen Ming's hand. Chen Ming answered the phone with the fake body of the 14th Legion as usual. The president's voice came out immediately. "The updated data for the new week has been sent. Please receive it." The impact of the sequelae of dimensional infection is still expanding. There are already several scattered star systems in the Camo star region with a 100% rate of newborn deformities. The obstetrics and gynecology and psychology departments of hospitals will probably be overcrowded for at least the next 8 or 9 months. Chen Ming didn't have time to look at the data given by the president. Just listening to what the president said, he could already feel the trouble. The situation is still very bad. What about the others? Not ideal either. Although we are cooperating with the Empire to mass-produce new equipment, many people are also using the equipment to find the source of dimensional infection. But we can't find it, and the several star systems with 100% distortion rate are also we have dug deep into the ground to find it, but it is not the source of development. Then are we still the same as before? Yes, we just need to do our own things, and others can do whatever they want. The pace of our association has always been consistent with the Empire, mainly maintaining stability and handling incidents. By the way, did I tell you about that person before? Which one? And whooping. Chen Ming's expression became more serious. And whooping? Who? It's the psychic who I mentioned before who nipped the infection of a dimension on the Zhuojing space station. Oh, him. What happened? He is suspected to have joined Zhuojing. Chen Ming pretended to be stunned for a second. Didn't he say 2 days ago that he solved the dimensional infection and massacred the Zhuojing space station? How come he joins Zhuojing now? The situation is a bit complicated. The president explained. Not many people know the specific news. I also got some scattered news from the Beniyu Starfield government. It is said that a space station there was massacred, and it was a space station full of ordinary people. The culprit, judging from the traces left at the scene, is that in whooping. But they also said that there are others. They are also investigating the traces left by a psychic and will not allow any outsiders to intervene for the time being. Later, they gave me an explanation for my sake. It was said that in whooping was suspected of having a violent attack, so he launched an indiscriminate massacre. Then a member of the left path had been tracking in whooping, and after he finished the massacre, he took him away as a criminal. To be honest, I was a little bit unconvinced at this point, but they also showed me a photo of An Whooping talking to someone from the left path. The president immediately sent a photo over. It was the scene where Chen Ming talked to Chen Ming on the wreckage of the space station. This photo cleverly avoided the angle of the 2 cruisers with wreckage left in the galaxy, perfectly captured in Whooping's face, and also captured a little of the black fog on Chen Ming's body, which indirectly proved Chen Ming's identity. As for An Whooping's identity, it can be confirmed when An Whooping does not enter the insect state and moves in the vacuum like nothing happened. This photo should have been taken by Chen Ming, who secretly placed a camera in the black fog state. Otherwise, if it was the wreckage of the space station, Chen Ming still maintained control over it and could not have been unaware of the existence of this photo. However, the impact was not great. Anyway, Chen Ming had more critical evidence in his hands. But Chen Ming still had a question to ask. Did the Beniyu Star region government explain how the space station became like this? It is already a ruin, right? They said they didn't know. It was like this when they came. They also said that An Whooping showed large-scale destructive capabilities last time, and it is normal to use it on the space station this time. That's indeed the case. There is nothing to refute. After sending the photo, the president's tone was mixed with some regret. So this is an indiscriminate massacre after all, and it is also a serious crime for psychics. It is not impossible for An Whooping to follow Zhuojing out of fear of crime. But this is not good news for us. Chen Ming immediately agreed. It is indeed not good news for a potential friendly to become an enemy. But since it is violent disorder, then the last massacre of Zhuojing space station should not be caused by a violent attack, right? The people of the Beniyu government said that you meant that, but I don't agree. The Odin Star region has been very active in contacting me. The evidence from them clearly shows that An Whooping is only in the early stage of violent attack and can completely control himself. The massacre of Zhuojing space station also deliberately avoided causing harm to civilians. It is impossible for him to change his temperament in less than a week. Something must have happened in the past period of time. It's a pity that I haven't met this person after all, so I don't have as much say in An Whooping as the Odin and Beniyu governments. I have seen some other photos of the scene over there. The traces that can be preserved when the space station was destroyed are basically the same as the last time, which can roughly confirm that Whooping did carry out the massacre. Before there is more evidence, we can only deal with it according to the statement of the Binyu star region. Chen Ming summarized and asked, "What you mean is to guard against Whooping first, right?" "Yes, he will definitely follow Zhuijing next, and Zhuijing's recent move is Kayamo. But Whooping is unlikely to go directly to Kayamo. There is now a legion in the Kayamo star region responsible for the hidden blockade. Any outsiders must be examined before entering, and cruiser-level jumps are now completely prohibited." "Which legion is in charge?" "The 5th Legion." "5th? Isn't it the local army and war zone that is responsible?" The president shook his head slightly in a place where Chen Ming couldn't see and said, "To avoid suspicion, the local army can only shrink in their own bases now, and they will be blocked if they come out. So the matter of the galaxy blockade must be handed over to the nearest legion that has no direct interest in the local government." "Oh," Chen Ming agreed. "What did the 5th Army do before? I don't think I've heard of it." "It's normal that you haven't heard of it. The 5th Army is mainly responsible for another direction, not the main branch of the 14th Army. The mechanical clan didn't just block the Empire in one direction, so the 5th Army is responsible for dealing with other mechanical clan and maintaining a confrontation with the mechanical clan. Then the 5th Army and the 7th Army have a cooperative relationship and take turns on duty, which is different from the 14th Army dealing with the main force of Yue alone. Originally, when the 7th Army came back recently, the 5th Army should have taken over the shift. But since it happened to encounter this kind of thing, it's too late to temporarily rotate. So we postponed the rotation and handed over the matter of blocking the galaxy to the 5th Army. After all, they have been on the front line and have the ability." After listening to the president's story, Chen Ming had a general understanding of the army responsible for blocking the star field. Out of curiosity, Chen Ming asked again, "When was the last rotation?" 5 years ago. The rotation was every 5 years. This 5-year rotation is quite special because it happens to be the time point of technological iteration. I heard that you seem to have made a few technologies, right? The technologies you make are usually taken by the rotating legions to the place where they confront the mechanical race for small-scale, low-intensity war tests. And the antimatter technology that has been discussed a lot in the Empire recently was originally going to go to the front line with the 5th Legion, but now it seems the Sun will have to delay for a while. We've gone off topic. The president coughed and brought back the topic that Chen Ming had digressed from. The border of Kamo Star region is now under the full surveillance of the 5th Legion. But there are still some loopholes. Some frigates or smaller spacecraft may be able to pass through the blockade. So I hope you can help out a little and use your psychic power to assist our work here. Once you find Whooping's trace, try to capture him. We must not let him come into contact with those possible people in Kamo Star region. The left diameter experienced by the dimension. Chen Ming said in doubt, "I understand the truth. I can also deal with it. But how can I find the need to find Whooping in such a large star domain?" Although the Empire also has the splints, they do not experience the experience of dimension infection, and they cannot quickly confirm whether there is a dimension infection in a place, and it is easy to get an accident, and the efficiency is low. And you have experienced a dimension infection, you can't deal with it in person. I don't have the ability to remotely control the spacecraft like you. You can help in this regard. I have a lot of clues on my hand, and they are all lacking in the investigation. Chen Ming had already made it clear that he was willing, but the president had been handling it himself. Apart from synchronizing the information with him, he did not ask him to do anything. Since the president has taken the initiative to bring up this matter now, it seems that the situation in Kamo Star region is really not good. Then Chen Ming will definitely not refuse. Under the concerns of Zhuijing, the mechanical race, Yue, and even the dimensional infection, the Empire and all normal people will rise and fall together. Even Chen Ming is no exception. Chen Ming decisively agreed, "No problem, I will send Yue Corps directly to deal with it, but the supplies and the proof that Yue Corps is allowed to operate in the Empire. I will definitely make it up to you. If you find the source, don't go in directly. Just tell me and help stop the outsiders from that galaxy." Especially don't let Wuping enter that galaxy. He is the person we need to worry about the most now. Chen Ming confirmed. Just investigate and stop people? Yes, since Zhuojing has clearly mastered the ability to create dimensional infection to a certain extent, it is best not to force them. Even if they find it, they have to take it slowly and never rush. Okay, I understand. After Chen Ming confirmed the president's needs again, the president sent him a communication code. This is the communication code of the head of the Fifth Corps who is cooperating with me now. Although the news will be summarized to me in the end, they still have the first-hand news. It should be no problem to set up a discussion group based on the military network. Chen Ming now has a basic understanding of military things, so he immediately said, I understand this. The 14th Corps also has similar things. The president did not say more, but finally said, okay, I will tell you other news later. Thank you for your trouble. The communication ended. Chen Ming's expression was a little bit tense after putting down the terminal. After all, he must know that Wuping really wants to enter Kamo. At that time, we still have to see the situation and decide whether to stop Wuping. To be precise, to stop Zhuojing, the Qinmian, who is with Wuping. Anyway, although Wuping is still Wuping now, his body has been replaced with a new one, and his brain is also new. The old body and brain are stored in other places by Chen Ming. There is no need to worry about any strange reactions from people who have experienced dimensional infection with Zhuojing. Even when necessary, Chen Ming can help Zhuojing send Wuping into the Kamo Star region. Of course, it is necessary, and the specific way to do it depends on the development of the next few days. On the other side, after hanging up the phone, the president picked up the report he had just put down before calling Chen Ming. The content shown in the report is no longer pessimistic, but very bad. What he said before that he needed the help of the outside army to blockade was not because a star region was too large and difficult to block. No matter how big a star region within an empire is, it is very small for the empire, and it is not an existence that cannot be blocked. And it does not mean that you must avoid suspicion. Under normal circumstances, the affairs of a star region are handled by the star region itself. It is said to avoid suspicion, but the real reason for avoiding suspicion is that they are facing inexplicable resistance in many places when they are doing things in the Kamo Star region. Zhuojing's penetration in the Kamo Star region is somewhat beyond imagination. I don't know how many people that psychic has converted for Zhuojing. This is the real trouble. Moreover, it has been almost 2 weeks since Chen Ming broke the news of the infection in the Zhuojing dimension. The infection in the dimension has basically been confirmed, and the deformity rate, which is much higher than that in several neighboring star fields, has proved this. But 2 weeks have passed, and there are still a large number of star systems that do not have enough manpower to conduct in-depth investigations, and a lot of energy is still involved in those who do not know whether they are related to Zhuojing or not. That's why he came to Chen Ming and hinted at the bad situation in his words. I hope Chen Ming can help, just as the president was worried about the Kamo star field incident. In the Homa star field next to the Kamo star field, Wuan is still sitting in the same bar today. However, Hu Yi is not here, but is on a video call with Wuan in the terminal in Wuan's hand. Looking at the background behind Wuan, he is now on a sailing spaceship. Wuan clicked a few times on the terminal and said, "New clues have just arrived. I have sent you new information about the psychic who destroyed the Zhuojing space station that you are tracking now." Hui seemed to be impatient. It seemed that he had been waiting for a long time, since he set out to look for Wuping's traces last time and had not found any clues. Let me see it quickly. You said his name was Wuping last time, right? Yes, Wuping. Wuan's tone had a very strange feeling. Even Hui could feel it. What's wrong? It's okay. Remember to pay more attention to this guy. As a person who has experienced dimensional infection, it is troublesome for him to get together with Zhuojing now. Get together with Zhuojing? Hui asked in confusion. He didn't get Wuan's answer, so he didn't say much. He just silently looked at the information Wuan gave him. 10 minutes later, Hui also put down the terminal and said to Wuan, who had been waiting for a long time, "That's not easy to deal with." Originally, he didn't hide his whereabouts. He relied on the idea of the Odin star field to pursue him without notifying other star fields and walked towards Kayamo. Now he is in trouble. Zhuojing can't be exposed to the public, so how can we pursue him? You are actually concerned about this? Wuan asked back incomprehensibly. Is it important whether we can pursue him? The important thing is that after this person is related to Zhuojing, it is no longer a question of whether to pursue or not. As Wuan spoke, his tone suddenly slowed down a little, and he seemed to still be a little confused. But this time his misunderstanding was not directed at Hu Yi, but at other places. Anyway, don't worry. I'll think of a way to help you find out in Wuping's information. Wait for me for 2 days, and I should be able to get results. Do you have people in Zhuojing? I can't say. Question mark. Hui asked, what do you mean? Wuan waved his hand. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Just go and do your own thing. Maybe someone will be able to help you soon. Wuan hung up the phone directly. After hanging up the phone, he muttered to himself, of course, they may also beat you up, but don't beat you to death. He opened the address book and found a few people who were specially marked. Old Wu and Chen Ming were among them. Looking at the 3 words Wu Ping and above, Wu An's hand couldn't help but move on the 2 words Chen Ming. How come someone who doesn't know how to name something just puts the names of people around him in a different order? Thornzerg, new psychic power. How did you do it? Wu An sighed and finally pointed his finger at Chen Ming's name. At the same time, at the edge of the galaxy that Chen Ming had just left the day before, the spaceship that Liang Fei and Li Weiqi were riding on finally arrived here. However, as soon as they arrived here, they were stopped by the local government's fleet at the edge of the galaxy. Even if Liang Fei had found a relationship with the upper level, he could only say a few words to those people in the Benia government who didn't seem to want to communicate. But it was obviously impossible to negotiate a result with the Benia government with just a few words. Liang Fei was also forced to hurry up, so he asked Li Weiqi to stay where he was and left the captain's room alone. As Liang Fei left, 30 minutes passed in a blink of an eye. Only Li Weiqi was left pacing back and forth in the captain's room anxiously. Suddenly, the door of the captain's room opened. Liang Fei sat down on the sofa as soon as he came in, took a big sip of tea to moisten his throat, and said to Li Weiqi, who had come over, "There is bad news." According to the Benia government, this space station is an ordinary space station and has nothing to do with Zhuojing. They said that in Wuping massacred such an ordinary space station and then left here with the psychics of Zhuojing. Ordinary space station? Didn't in Wuping say that this was a Zhuojing space station when he called me before? Liang Fei shook his head and said, so I said, according to the Benia government. They said they would investigate the destruction of the space station, and they would investigate it strictly, and they would never give any criminals a chance to escape. It's all empty talk and nonsense. Liang Fei said angrily, they have decided to completely block the galaxy, and we can't go through it directly. There is no way to determine whether in Wuping is telling the truth or the Benia government is telling the truth. Li Weiqi pushed his sunglasses and said, I am more inclined to believe that in Wuping is telling the truth. Me too, but do you know what this means? The Benia government has been infiltrated by Zhuojing. Yes, so we can't just jump to conclusions. We must find enough clues. Li Weiqi's eyes under the sunglasses quickly became firm. I feel that the clues are enough, because in Wuping really solved the source of infection in a dimension. And you have also seen the database on the space station. It is not only the experimental data of the space station and the underground laboratory, but also the clues of those who are related to Zhuojing. And Wuping is a psychic. Although he is a physical psychic, his brain is at least better than ordinary psychics. People are more developed. A psychic who can remember the list of left and right left-wing elements on the space station, and who can restrain his desire to kill and not affect civilians, can't possibly remember the location of a left-wing space station whose coordinate data he deliberately erased. He also gave us the list of substitute materials used by Zhuojing to make clones. For Zhuojing, can these things be given out? In addition, there is the affirmation from the president of the Psychic Association. And Wuping is definitely a good person. Liang Fei certainly knows everything Li Weiqi said. But before there is real evidence that can be hammered, these indirect evidences can only prove that in Wuping was a good person before. It can't prove that in Wuping is a good person when he is in a complete outbreak of rage. Liang Fei was about to dissuade the young Li Weiqi, but Li Weiqi suddenly clicked on the vibrating terminal and said, "Wait a minute. My men who went to the colony where Enwupiing had settled before sent me some new things, which can also prove that Enwupiing is a good person." "What is it?" Li Weiqi placed a surveillance video of the port and two simple contracts in front of Liang Fei. After arriving at the colony, Enwupiing signed two contracts with the port maintenance plant for maintenance and material supply. Then he plans to experience the local characteristics and customs as before. Liang Fei took the terminal, took a look and said, "Well, I see, there is no problem here. He has been missing for many years outside, and he must not have been to the prosperous star field. Since he passed by, it is normal to go there when repairing the spacecraft. But there will be problems soon." Li Weiqi stretched out his finger and slid it on the terminal screen, adjusting the video to the right time and switching to the right angle. It can be clearly seen that Enwupiing, who was originally looking forward to it, suddenly had a drastic change in expression. It may be at this time that his rage has reached the edge of an outbreak. "That's not right." Liang Fei frowned and said, "From what I saw before, Enwupiing's rage is definitely in the early stage. Even if it has entered the middle stage in the past few days, it is impossible for him to reach the point of collapse in a few minutes. It is impossible for the desire to kill to rise so quickly. Only in the late stage will there be sudden symptoms of rage. In the early and middle stages, it must take a period of accumulation for rage to have enough impact. He was able to control himself on the Zwujing space station before. He must be aware of the onset of rage. It is impossible for him to be close to rage. At the time of the violence, they went to a colony for activities. There is a problem here. Whose problem is it? Although Enwupiing has a problem, I don't think the source of the problem is Enwupiing. Keep releasing it. We need more clues." Li Weiqi shook his head and said, "There is no more." After Enwupiing's expression changed, he went back to the spaceship directly. He left without refunding the deposit and arrived at our current place. From the time given by the Banyo government, it can be said that he rushed all the way here with a clear purpose and started the massacre as soon as he arrived. Liang Fei thought along with Li Weiqi's words. Suddenly he thought of something and said, "Oh, I can add one more piece of information. The Banyo government didn't tell us why Enwupiing destroyed the space station. They just said they were still investigating. The space station database was burned, and only a little evidence related to Enwupiing was left. But the destruction of the space station is obviously completely different from Enwupiing's previous style of behavior, and since we all suspect that Zwujing has infiltrated the Banyo government, we might as well be bold when assuming it was Zwujing who induced Enwupiing's violent attack. Isn't there a rumor recently? Zwujing has the ability to brainwash people from a distance, which is very harmful to ordinary people. Although the effect on psychics does not seem ideal, it should be easier to disturb a psychic with a fragile mind who suffers from berserker syndrome. Is it possible that Enwupiing really chose a Zwujing space station and then planned to kill all the people in Zwujing like last time, leaving ordinary people behind? But this time, Enwupiing's berserker syndrome was not a slow accumulation, but a symptom actively induced by the psychics of Zwujing. So Zwujing was able to predict in advance and prepared corresponding means at several Zwujing-related bases that Enwupiing might go to. When Enwupiing was slaughtering Zwujing elements, he took the initiative to jump out and destroy the entire space station and asked the people of the Banyo government to help cover it up, completely ruining Enwupiing's reputation. Liang Fei's series of analyses made Li Weiqi unable to help but consider the rationality of it. And this happened to correspond to the facts, so the rationality was naturally first class. Before Li Weiqi could give his thoughts, Liang Fei suddenly thought of something else and said, "Wait, has he contacted the local anti-cult bureau like last time? Go check it out quickly, go behind the scenes, don't let anyone notice it." Li Weiqi quickly followed the order and gave orders to his men on the terminal. Then the other problems are basically solved now. I also believe that Enwupiing will not massacre people. Enwupiing is definitely a good person. But there is another question. What is the relationship between Enwupiing and Zwujing? Although all the evidence can point to the fact that Enwupiing is not massacring people, Liang Fei still raised this question too calmly. "You have seen the photos. He is talking to the psychic of Zhujiang. It should be a foregone conclusion that he left with the psychic of Zhujiang. Why did he follow Zhujiang? He and Zhujiang, exactly. Li Weiqi raised his head and said, there must be a reason behind it. There must be. Maybe Beiniu is also adding fuel to the flames. Liang Fei still didn't want to directly label a star field as Zhujiang, so he just hummed vaguely. Then he picked up the terminal and contacted an informant in their local star field. A few minutes later, Li Weiqi finally received a call from his subordinates. It's confirmed. Just over an hour before Wupiang called us, the Anti-Cult Bureau of the Beiniu star field had a record of an unknown communication code dialing in. Liang Fei also hung up the phone with the person he was talking to at this time and said, but the Anti-Cult Bureau of Beiniu said that they have never received any unknown calls. They even cooperated and gave me a communication record. Superfluous disguise. Well, there is nothing to say. There is a problem in the Beiniu star field. But even if there is a problem in the Beiniu star field, we can't say it directly. We have to hand it over to the higher-ups to arrange an investigation. This is not our mission. Our focus is still in Wupiang. In this way, in Wupiang and Zhua, it is likely that Zhujiang used the destruction of the space station to coerce in Wupiang. In order to avoid being hunted down by us in a legal sense, he can only follow Zhujiang temporarily. We have to find him. Li Weiqi asked. He has gone with Zhujiang, and the clues we are tracking are also broken. How can we find him? It's a very simple reason. I ask you what Zhujiang is doing now? In Kamo Star region? Li Weiqi reacted as soon as he said it. The only place where the Zhujiang members who took Wupiang away can go now is there. Zhujiang must have found Wupiang at this time to turn a powerful psychic into a friend. Although the means are a bit bad, turning enemies into friends should be put in quotation marks, but at least they did do part of it. But we have nothing to do with Kayamo. Kayamo is now relying on the 5th Legion, Fanshao, and the Psychic Society to deal with it. It is not easy for us to intervene. Liang Fei waved his hand and said, no, there is still a way to intervene. What method? In Wupiang's background, Li Weiqi did not understand what Liang Fei meant. Isn't in Wupiang from the Edge star field next to us? His background has nothing to do with us. He can be related to us. Liang Fei had conceived some slightly dirty means in his mind and said, so far, our action of tracking in Wupiang has only been communicated with the Psychic Society. The neighboring star field doesn't even know that they have a level 5 psychic. The migration of civilian identity is not troublesome. Waiting for the news of the best book star domain. It will take 2 or 3 days. We allocated the house and the government's work, and I used the excuse to deal with our own people. The tightly wrapped clothes boarded a spacecraft in a colony closer to the Color Inc. star domain. Now that it is under control, it will be convenient to settle accounts with Zhujiang in the future. After entering the captain's room, Chen Ming finally couldn't help but throw his thick coat on the sofa and said to Qimian beside him, it's already the 4th ship. Will we have to change to a new ship next time? Qimian said as a matter of course we have to change. Hiding is the best. You don't know how many people in the Empire are watching our movements now, especially me. What's wrong with you? Aren't you going to Kamo? Don't you know? Chen Ming also said as a matter of course, I just learned from some places that you have made a big move in Kamo, and I am going to ruin it for you. Who knows what the situation is? Oh, you just need to know that most of our high-level forces are gathered there. I am the only psychic who can go out, so of course there will be many people paying attention to me. Qimian lay down on another sofa, raised his head and closed his eyes. He has been busy in the past few days. Although Wupiang did not do anything, he must confirm whether anyone is tracking them from the clues provided by all parties. He had to choose the right route under the pursuit of people from all sides, choose the right spacecraft and time to go to different places, and he had to go all the way to the Kamo Star region. If he wasn't a psychic, he would have collapsed from exhaustion. It can only be said that there were more people being pursued than he imagined. I'm afraid it's not just his problem, but also the problem brought by Wupiang, who he had just abducted. Qimian rested for a while, slightly opened his eyes and looked at Wupiang next to him. In the past 3 days, Li had been familiar with Wupiang and had some understanding of Wupiang's character. Even Chen Ming had to say that Whooping was indeed a good person, but he was a good person who restrained himself with morality. In other words, Whooping's essence is still a neutral person. So as long as he is guided by the right method, Whooping can also become a villain. This is what Chen Ming is going to do next. So he plans to use the previous incident as an excuse to try to test it out and find out what happened in the space station and the completely destroyed underground laboratory.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.